Hey guys, tonight we're doing something a little different. We're going to time travel. Yeah, that old chestnut. But not to some royal court with silken robes and goblets of wine. Nope. We're diving headfirst into the icy, grimy, barely lit world of Viking daily life. Specifically the Longhouse. And trust me, you probably won't survive this. Not because of a battle or a mythical creature, but because basic existence here is an Olympic-level endurance test. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop your city and the time down in the comments. I want to know what part of the world is staying up late with me tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. So it starts like this. You arrive in Scandinavia in the middle of winter. It's sometime in the 9th century, give or take a generation, and there's a wind slicing sideways across the fjord that has absolutely no interest in your comfort. You've been dropped off the back of a narrow dragon-headed ship. Elegant, yes, but wildly impractical as a taxi service. And the moment your modern sneakers hit the crunchy, snow-pocked earth, they're soaked through. And not just cold-soaked, like existential cold. The kind of chill that curls up behind your eyes and whispers, "You shouldn't be here." You're trying to orient yourself, but your breath is already misting in front of your face in frantic little puffs. All around you are figures moving in the half-light, bundled in heavy cloaks, fur-lined boots, and expressions that do not suggest welcome. You're the stranger, the outsider, the one who stepped into the past wearing denim and a vague sense of confidence. Bad combo. The Longhouse stands maybe 50 paces away, but it feels like miles. It's hulking, uneven, and weirdly organic, like someone tried to grow a barn out of turf and timber. Smoke curls out from a low vent in the roof, and the sloping walls look as if they've been patched 100 times with whatever was lying around. Planks, driftwood, maybe bits of some unlucky rival clan. As you squelch toward it, you notice the doorway isn't just wood. It's framed with goat skulls. Actual skulls, horns and all. A few of them are charred black. You don't need Google Translate to know that this is not subtle interior decorating. It's a warning. There's no one greeting you. No doorman, no welcome platter of grapes. Just the door slightly ajar, creaking softly in the wind like something from a horror movie that everyone forgets. Ends with the entire cast dying horribly. But you're here for the experience, right? You duck through the low entrance, much lower than you expected, and bam! Your face gets punched by the atmosphere inside. It's like someone lit a campfire in a gym locker, threw in a wet bear rug and added a dash of dying animal for aroma. The Longhouse is warm, sure, but it's the kind of warmth that comes from proximity to other steaming bodies, not central heating. Every breath you take is half ash, half people. You cough, naturally, and 3 heads swivel toward you. One of them is a toddler holding a bone dagger. You nod awkwardly. He doesn't blink. The floor is dirt. Just dirt. Packed down and vaguely sticky in spots where who knows what was spilled or bled or cooked. The light comes from the fire pit that runs down the centre of the room, an open flame kept going 24/7 with logs that hiss and pop like they're offended to be here. There's no chimney, which as you're learning means the smoke has nowhere to go except into your lungs and your eyeballs. It's a slow gas chamber, but with more goat hair floating in it. Your eyes sting, your nose runs, you're already sweating under your hoodie, which now smells like smoked meat and despair. You try to stand still and look harmless, but that just makes you more noticeable. Around you, benches and raised sleeping platforms line the walls, cluttered with fur throws, wooden bowls and the occasional dog. A woman with braided silver hair and an apron that could double as a canvas tent is hacking something unrecognisable with a cleaver. She doesn't stop to ask who you are. She doesn't stop at all. You try not to look directly at what she's chopping. This is not a museum. It's not a reenactment. This is real life, real time, and real Norse people doing what they do best, surviving in a world that actively tries to kill them. Fun fact, Viking Longhouses weren't just places to sleep. They were your office, kitchen, workshop, family reunion site and war strategy bunker, all rolled into one smoky rectangle. Dozens of people could live here at once, entire families, multiple generations, plus animals. Yes, actual animals. Chickens, goats, sometimes pigs, depending on the season. They shared the space for warmth. And if you're wondering what that does to the smell, congratulations. You already know. Here's the kicker, though. Most historians agree that longhouses were marvels of design for their time. The curved roof, the turf insulation, the central hearth, it all worked. For them. But you, with your tick-tock attention span and sensitive sinuses, are currently contemplating lying down and giving up because the air tastes like fireplace ashes and animal sweat. And this is just the foyer. Oh, and quirky fact of the day. The longhouse floor was often used to bury the dead. Like, directly underfoot. So you might literally be standing on someone's great-grandfather, which could explain that cold breeze tickling your ankles even though there are no windows. Debate-wise, archaeologists still argue over how social space was divided. Some think longhouses had strict zones, like men at the high seat, women near the fire, slaves near the door. Others say it was more fluid, based on role and status. But either way, one thing's for sure, you don't rank. Not yet. And outside, well, it's not getting any warmer. The storm's picking up, snow is starting to fall sideways, and the door swings shut behind you with a low final thud. Welcome to the long night. You don't know whether to bow, nod, or pretend to disappear, so you do a little of each, which just makes you look like a weird foreigner, which, let's face it, you are. Nobody pays much attention though. A baby cries somewhere in the shadows. Someone near the back lets out a wet, phlegmy cough that echoes like a warning bell. And through it all the fire crackles in the middle, throwing dancing shadows on the wooden beams overhead. You're still blinking through smoke when a bearded man brushes past you, hauling a sack that reeks of something sharp and meaty. You try not to ask. The longhouse is dim, but not pitch black. Here and there, little oil lamps burn with flickering flames, casting just enough light to trip over. The smell of tallow, thick animal fat used as fuel, adds to the scent cocktail already destroying your modern brain. And speaking of modernity, your sense of time is starting to collapse. You glance around and realise there are no windows, no clocks, no artificial anything. You could be here for 5 minutes or 5 hours. The only real measurement of time is the groaning wind outside and the snoring elder near the back wall. You shuffle farther in, hoping to find some kind of resting spot or, at the very least, a place where no one looks ready to murder you for stepping on their cloak. Eventually, you're waved toward a dark alcove with low wooden walls and a rough fur throw draped over what could generously be called a mattress. It's more of a wooden box, really. A rectangular enclosure just big enough for 2 people to curl up in and pretend they're not slowly freezing to death. Welcome to your bed. Or your coffin. The line is pretty blurry here. You sit down carefully, and the entire structure creaks like it's got secrets. The fur smells like something that used to be alive, died tragically, and then came back slightly mouldy. The wood beneath is hard and warped, the kind of surface that encourages permanent hip damage. No pillow, obviously, just a wadded-up tunic someone may or may not still want back. You shift and immediately feel the chill of the planks seep through your jeans. So yeah, good luck with sleeping. Oh, and surprise! This cubby isn't private. You're sharing the enclosure with something that huffs in its sleep and smells like hay and wet leather. You peer over and find yourself nose to nose with a goat. A real, living, currently snoring goat. Its name is Snorri, probably. Or maybe that's just the noise it makes. Either way, you're roommates now. This is how people sleep here. Stacked along the longhouse walls in little enclosures, family members jigsawed together under threadbare furs. Privacy's a joke. You sleep. Where there's space, curled around relatives, livestock, and whatever personal gods you pray to for heat. Personal space. Not a thing. At all. You think you can handle it until the goat shifts in its sleep and kicks you in the shin. Hard. You bite your lip and exhale through your nose. You've been here, what, an hour? Let's talk about temperature. See, the longhouse is insulated with turf and built low to trap heat, but it's still freezing. The fire only does so much, especially when the outer walls are basically dirt and prayer. Your hoodie, now damp with smoke and anxiety, is no match for the cold that creeps in through every crack. You find yourself doing that desperate micro-shivering like a car engine trying to start in winter. But everyone else? They're fine. A woman walks by in socks made of wool strips and a tunic that looks like it's older than you, and she doesn't even flinch. You, on the other hand, are 80% goosebumps, and because it's your lucky day, the wind outside suddenly shifts. A burst of air whips through a seam in the wall, and a pile of snow dust lands directly on your exposed neck. You gasp, Snorri snorts, and someone across the fire grunts in your direction like it's your fault for not being made of stone and stoicism. Fun historical tidbit. Viking longhouses weren't just places to live. They were also used for ceremonies, storytelling, council meetings, and whatever else required being inside and not dead. That central fire pit? It was the heart of everything. Meals were cooked there, clothes were dried, gossip was traded, and sometimes, if the weather was bad enough, people just sat and stared into it like they were trying to hypnotise their own misery away. And here's your quirky side note. Sometimes, especially during midwinter festivals like Yule, the Longhouse became a full-blown party zone. Loud music, dancing, mead drinking, feasts that involved questionable parts of animals, all while the wind howled outside. You wouldn't know it from the current grim silence, but this place has seen its share of chaotic joy. Just not tonight. Tonight it's mostly soup smells and passive-aggressive coughing. Now, let's dive into a little scholarly debate. There's still some disagreement over whether longhouses were permanent homes for large extended families or more seasonal communal shelters. Some believe they housed elite families with servants, while others argue they were multi-purpose hubs shared by several households. Archaeological evidence suggests both models existed depending on region and wealth. But whatever the arrangement, the vibe was always the same. Crowded, smoky, loud, and survival-focused. You weren't meant to be comfortable, you were meant to be alive. Back in your cubby, the goat shifts again, and you realise you've lost feeling in your toes. Not like, wow, it's cold, but like, I may never walk normally again. You try tucking your feet under the fur, but that just means pressing them up against Snorri, who isn't thrilled. He glares at you like you've just insulted his ancestors. Around you, the room begins to settle. Voices lower to murmurs. Someone farts, unapologetically. The fire pops. A baby begins to wail, and someone hushes it with the kind of stern whisper that implies they're just as cold, just as tired, and would really appreciate it if the child could stop ruining the illusion of peace. You lie back, eyes open, staring at the low wooden ceiling. There are carvings up there, little notches and symbols, maybe counting days or recording names. Or maybe they're just doodles from a bored teen who lived and died in this room 1,000 years ago. It's a strange comfort, knowing someone else once lay in this same spot, staring up, waiting for sleep that wouldn't come, and outside the snow keeps falling. Because of course it does. Morning doesn't arrive so much as seep in, slow, reluctant, and grey. You're not woken by sunlight, because sunlight doesn't really exist here in winter. Instead, it's the sounds. The rhythmic shuffle of boots on packed dirt, the wet coughs echoing off the timber walls, the shriek of some child who has clearly already had a full day of chaos before you even blink open your smoke-crusted eyes. You try to sit up and immediately regret every decision that led you here. Your back is a slab of icy ache. Your mouth tastes like old charcoal, and Snorri the goat is now standing on your thigh like he owns you, which he might. You shuffle out of the box bed, legs creaking, hoodie stinking, socks questionable. The air is marginally brighter, but only in the sense that you can now see more clearly how much grime is clinging to every surface. The fire is still going, but barely. A few tired embers clinging to life. Someone pokes at it with a stick, yawning in Old Norse. You think it's a greeting, so you nod, which they interpret as an invitation to hand you the stick. Suddenly you're fire duty. Welcome to the team. As you fumble your way through reviving the hearth, your stomach lets out a guttural complaint. Right. Food. You haven't eaten since you left the ship, and even then, the seaweed-tasting flatbread didn't count. A woman, possibly in her 30s or 300s, depending on how hard her life's been, ladles something greyish and lumpy from a cauldron that's been hanging over the fire all night. She slaps it into a wooden bowl and shoves it into your hands before walking away, like she's done you a huge favour. You peer into it. Porridge? Maybe. It has the consistency of school glue and smells like salted regret. Still, you're hungry, and this is what breakfast looks like in the Longhouse. No pancakes, no cinnamon rolls, no cold brew, just hot sludge and a piece of dried fish that feels and tastes like it's been stored in someone's boot for a decade. You gnaw at the fish, eyes watering, trying to pretend it's jerky. It is not jerky. It is something else. Next to you, a child, barefoot, snot-faced and fully armed with a small knife, dunks a hunk of the same fish into her porridge and chews like it's a delicacy. You are now the weakest member of this tribe. She knows it. You know it. Snorri definitely knows it. Here's the fun historical reality. Viking food was about as utilitarian as it gets. You ate what you had when you had it. Grains like barley and rye were common, and most meals involved porridge, flatbread, dried meat or fish, and maybe some turnips if you were lucky. Dairy was a staple too. Cheese, butter, and something resembling yogurt. But not the creamy stuff you're thinking of. More like tart, curdled survival goo. And while you chew your breakfast/punishment, you learn one vital thing. There is no coffee. You're on day 1 of caffeine withdrawal, and your body is preparing to sue you. Your temples throb, your eyes twitch, your soul weeps, and there's nothing you can do but sip another spoonful of warm fish mush and pretend to be okay. You sit near the hearth, trying to stay out of the way as the longhouse shifts into full daytime chaos. People step over you like you're furniture. A boy accidentally drops an axe handle on your foot. Doesn't even apologise. Someone's braiding their beard with alarming speed and force. A woman is churning something in a barrel that smells faintly like regret and goat milk. And in the middle of it all, people are still eating, still moving, still completely indifferent to your crumbling sense of self. Here's your quirky fact of the day. In Viking times, fermented shark was sometimes considered a delicacy. That's right. Rotted shark meat, buried underground for weeks to ferment, then dug up and eaten at feasts. Not all Viking groups ate it regularly, but it did exist. And if you're wondering how it smells, well, imagine someone left fish in a sauna for a month and then served it at a wedding. You are, thankfully, not offered any. Yet. Across the longhouse, someone calls out in a tone that sounds vaguely annoyed and maybe like your name. You flinch, but nobody seems to care. It's just the start of the day, and people are already gearing up for a full slate of pre-modern misery. Someone's dragging in a bucket of ice to melt. Another's skinning a rabbit in the corner with what looks like an oyster shell. A third is already outside, shoveling snow off the roof with a piece of jawbone. You begin to understand. Everything is effort. Nothing happens unless you do it manually, while frozen, and probably while being watched by chickens. There's some academic debate about how communal Viking Longhouse meals really were. Some sources suggest everyone sat together and shared, but archaeological digs hint at a more stratified situation, where the wealthier, higher status individuals ate in the best spots and got the better cuts. You're still bottom tier, which means your porridge might have been scraped from the bottom of the cauldron twice. The low hum of conversation returns to the room, people beginning to map out their day. You, meanwhile, are now officially part of the background noise, just another smoke-blurred face at the edge of the hearth. You stand up slowly, knees cracking like old floorboards, and make your way toward the door, thinking maybe you'll get some fresh air. Spoiler, there is no fresh air. You push the heavy wooden plank open and step out into the world. Immediately, the cold punches you in the sinuses like a grudge-holding ghost. The wind screams across the hard-packed snow, flinging flakes into your eyes with Olympic precision. You gasp and inhale a lungful of cold that feels like you just kissed a glacier. Every inch of exposed skin starts to sting. Outside, the land is nothing but white and grey, snow-covered earth, frosty trees, a distant mountain crouched under a bruised sky. You're standing in a landscape that doesn't care whether you survive the day. In fact, it kind of hopes you don't. You shiver, teeth rattling, eyes squinting against the wind. Then you glance back at the longhouse, its smoke curling lazily into the dull sky, and realise, horrifyingly, that it was the cosy part of your day. You stand there for a moment, pretending to enjoy the view, even though every cell in your body is begging you to return to the smoky indoors. The cold here isn't like anything you've ever felt. It's not just cold, it's aggressive. It slides beneath your clothes like a thief and presses into your bones with all the subtlety of a headbutt. Your breath fogs and instantly crystallises on your eyelashes. The wind bites your ears so hard you check to make sure they're still attached. But no one else seems fazed. People are already moving about their morning chores like they were born in this frozen pit of the earth, which, okay, they actually were. To your left, a teen barely older than your cousin is lugging firewood like it's a bag of feathers. To your right, a hunched man with a twisted back and a face like sun-dried leather is hauling a sloshing bucket of something murky from a nearby stream, which you only now realise isn't frozen because it's flowing directly from a natural spring. You don't dare ask what's in the bucket. At this point, the answer is always worse than the mystery. Someone yells at you, or near you. It's hard to tell when everything's in Old Norse, but judging by the way a woman with a shovel is glaring and gesturing at the woodpile, it's clear you're on chore duty. You trudge over, feet stiff in your soaked sneakers, and begin the noble task of moving logs from one pile to another with fingers that have lost all sensation. You think you're doing okay, until the woman comes over, grabs a log and moves it twice as fast without gloves. This, you realise, is your life now. You're not a guest. You're not a tourist. You're an unpaid, unqualified, freezing labourer in the year 850 CE. You blink against the wind, your eyelashes now frosted, and remind yourself this is still technically just the morning. Let's talk chores. In Viking society, there was no such thing as downtime, unless you were dead, drunk, or a king. Everyone pulled their weight, even children. Daily survival took real work. Feeding animals, fetching water, chopping wood, spinning yarn, preserving food, fixing tools, and dealing with whatever nonsense the weather decided to throw at you. Everything was made by hand. You want butter, you churn it. You want clean clothes, you beat them on a rock in a half-frozen river and hope they don't freeze solid before you hang them. You, naturally, are assigned to water-hauling duty next. Why? Because you were standing too close to the wrong person at the wrong time. A shaggy-haired teen with a scar across his eyebrow hands you a wooden yoke with 2 sloshing buckets attached. You lift it onto your shoulders and almost collapse under the weight. He laughs and gestures toward the stream. You sigh and shuffle off, shoulders already screaming. The trek isn't far, but it feels like a march through a frozen purgatory. The snow's up to your calves, your socks are now sponges, and the wind picks up just enough to remind you that nature is in fact petty. The buckets sway and slosh, and by the time you make it to the stream you've already soaked one pant leg and possibly thrown out your lower back. And here comes the quirky fact of the day. Vikings used communal water sources not just for drinking, but also for ritual purification. Certain springs and streams were believed to be sacred, linked to the gods or ancestral spirits. So yeah, you might be drawing water from a place where someone once bathed before a human sacrifice. Hydration with a side of ancient ghost energy. You dunk the buckets carefully, hands red and numb, and start the long, painful shuffle back. Every step sends icy slosh over the rim, freezing into crusts on your clothes. By the time you return to the longhouse, your arms are jelly, your face is windburnt, and your soul is slightly cracked. The buckets are taken from you wordlessly, and just like that, you're reabsorbed into the flow of the morning. Now it's pig time. Yes, pigs. You're led to a small pen out back where several chunky, irritable pigs are grunting around in the snow-muddied slop. A wiry-haired boy hands you a stick, gestures to the trough, and leaves. That's it. No instructions, no supervision. Just you, a stick, and a group of animals that look like they've seen things. You do your best to scoop slop from a wooden bucket into the trough, nearly slipping twice. One pig bites your boot, another sneezes on you. You're not sure if that was an act of aggression or just an unfortunate coincidence, but either way, you now have pig phlegm on your sock. Somewhere a raven caws like it's laughing. A group of older kids watches from the fence, whispering and pointing. You catch one phrase, lazy thrall. It doesn't take a Norse to English dictionary to decode that insult. A thrall was a slave. In their eyes, you're not even a free member of the household. You're the lowest of the low, and you've earned the title simply by being incompetent at pig feeding. Here comes today's scholarly debate. Were thralls treated uniformly across Viking society? Some researchers believe they had more rights than other enslaved people in ancient cultures. They could earn their freedom, own modest possessions, and sometimes even rise in status. Others argue their lives were short, brutal, and completely controlled. Evidence points both ways, with most agreeing that life as a thrall was harsh, just degrees of harshness depending on your luck and your owner. You're feeling that harshness now as you drag the slop bucket back toward the barn. Your fingers are so stiff they won't even grip the handle properly. Someone pats your back, either in encouragement or pity. Hard to say. Back inside the longhouse, the heat feels different now. Less like relief, more like a humid slap. You strip off your outer layer, soaked hoodie, now officially a biohazard, and hang it near the fire to dry. It drips like a defeated animal. Someone tosses you a rag tunic that smells strongly of moss and unearned confidence. You put it on without question. You sit down again, this time on a bench near the fire, trying not to look like your body's giving up. A few people eat silently. One person is snoring with his head on a wooden bowl. You think you see someone spinning wool in the corner, twisting the strands between their fingers like they were born doing it. You weren't born doing any of this. You were born knowing how to Google, and yet, for a moment, you sit still. You listen to the gentle clatter of wooden bowls, the pop of fire, the muted rhythm of people moving in sync with ancient habit. It's not peaceful, exactly, but it is consistent, solid, honest even. You're out of your element, sure, but this world doesn't pretend to be anything it's not. It just is. You lean back, sniff, and immediately regret it. Your tunic has been previously owned by someone with a strong relationship to fish, but it's warm, kind of, and for now, that's enough. Your eyes are still stinging from the smoke when someone motions toward the fire with a long soot-blackened poker. You think they want you to stir it. You're wrong. The poker is handed to you not to prod the flames, but to clear out the ash, which has built up into a fluffy grey carpet thick enough to choke a dragon. You kneel down and immediately feel the warmth vanish as your knees press into the cold, gritty earth. The fire looks cosy from a distance, but up close it's mostly just hungry and loud. The air around the fire pit is thick, humid and strangely still. The Longhouse doesn't have a chimney, because why would it? Chimneys are for the weak, and the future instead, smoke is supposed to escape through a smoke hole in the roof. Spoiler, it doesn't. Not well, anyway. The result is a kind of low-hanging cloud that hovers at neck level, turning every breath into an ashtray sampling session. You start clearing ash like you're diffusing a bomb, slowly, carefully, eyes watering. With each scoop, your lungs get a little more dramatic. It's like trying to breathe through a barbecued pillow. Around you, people go about their business without a single cough. An old woman hums as she stirs something boiling in a pot of bones. A man sharpens a blade while whistling through a gap in his teeth. A child toddles through the haze holding what may or may not be a dead bird. You're the only one hacking like you're about to die on camera. Here's a fun historical truth that might kill you faster than any Viking axe. Indoor air quality in longhouses was awful. With no real ventilation and constant open flames, the smoke lingered like an uninvited ghost. Studies of ancient skeletons show that people suffered from chronic respiratory issues, especially the elderly and children. Their lungs were basically slow roasted over years of exposure, and no one thought twice about it. Smoke was just part of life. For you, it's a full-on emergency. You sit back, lightheaded, nose running, eyes rimmed red like you just watched the saddest movie ever. Your hands are covered in ash. Your tunic is now half charred wool and half emotional damage. You look up and realise the ceiling is barely visible through the grey haze. You start to wonder if you'll ever smell anything besides burning wood and regret again. And then someone opens the side door and the draft hits. Whoosh! Suddenly the smoke whips sideways, blasting through the house like a wave. Everyone leans slightly into it like it's a minor inconvenience. You gasp for the first clean breath you've had in hours and instantly regret it. Because the clean air is cold, very cold. Your sinuses freeze mid-inhale, a flake of ash sticks to your lip. The door slams shut, and just like that, the house is a sauna again. And here's your quirky fact of the day. Some longhouses actually had smoke-diverting planks installed in the ceiling, kind of like ancient HVAC, but they were rare and only partially effective. Most homes just learned to live with the haze. Some scholars suggest that the smoke even helped preserve wooden beams by killing off mould and pests. So basically, your lungs were sacrificed to save the architecture. Worth it? You stagger away from the fire, trying to blink the world back into focus. Someone pushes a wooden stool toward you. You sit, wheezing, grateful, and then realise it's not a seat, it's a tool for crushing grain. Your butt is now in a bowl of oats. Fantastic. You stand quickly, try to play it cool, and knock over a pile of kindling. Half the longhouse turns to look at you. No one says anything. Their expressions say enough. You're the weakest link. You're the soft one. The outsider who can't handle a little smoke and darkness and accidental goat urine on the floor. Let's talk about lighting. There isn't much. The longhouse relies mostly on the fire and a few small oil lamps to fight off the gloom. These lamps burn animal fat and give off a faint flickering glow that's less, let there be light, and more, can I borrow your phone flashlight for 2 seconds? Shadows dominate every corner. People move through the gloom by muscle memory. You stub your toe on a wooden beam that seems to leap out of the darkness just to ruin your day. You spot someone tending a side altar, just a small wooden shelf, but decorated with carved idols, bone charms, and a few blackened feathers. The figure lights what looks like a smudge stick and lets the smoke curl upward toward a small statue of Thor, hammer and all. You watch, entranced, but careful not to stare. Religion here isn't just belief, it's survival. You don't need to fully understand it to know it's powerful, and ancient, and watching. That brings us to our scholarly debate. Was the Longhouse just a home, or was it also a spiritual space? Some archaeologists argue that certain parts of the house were sacred, especially the high seat, where the head of the family sat. Others suggest the entire structure was imbued with ritual significance. It was the heart of the family, yes, but also a place for offerings, blessings, and sometimes even sacrifices. Think of it as a blend of house, church, and social media hub, all in one smoky room. Back at your spot near the fire, you finally get a moment to yourself. You sit still, breathing shallowly, watching the smoke twist and curl like it has somewhere better to be. The heat radiates from the coals, wrapping around you like a sleepy dog. Your skin stings from the temperature swing, but you don't move. You can't. Not yet. A man drops beside you, tall, rough, with a beard that could hide a squirrel colony. He grunts and hands you a horn cup filled with a cloudy liquid. You look at it, then at him. He nods once. You take a sip. It tastes like sour apples and mild vinegar, but not the worst thing you've had today. He takes a swig himself, leans back and lets out a contented sigh. Then, without a word, he stands and walks away. It's the first act of kindness you've gotten all day. Maybe you're earning your place here, smoke-filled lungs and all, or maybe he just wanted you to finish the dregs of his drink. Either way, you don't care. It was warm, and for 1 second you felt human again. The fire crackles. Somewhere behind you, a goat sneezes. You lean forward and close your eyes just for a moment. When your eyes open again, it's not because you're rested. It's because something wet and cold has landed on your face. You flinch, instinctively wiping your cheek, and your hand comes away with a smear of what you sincerely hope is melted snow. A quick glance up confirms your suspicion. A steady drip is coming through a gap in the ceiling, right above your assigned corner of misery. The Longhouse roof, as it turns out, is not entirely waterproof. It had looked so solid from the outside, layers of turf, thatch and timber lashed together with ancient engineering and questionable optimism. But now, in the early stages of a slow thaw or maybe a freak warm gust from the fjord, the roof is beginning to leak in artistic new ways. You dodge another drop just in time and scoot sideways, accidentally bumping a low-hanging beam with your head. You bite your tongue and try to pretend your dignity is still intact. Water in the Longhouse is a bigger deal than you'd think. It's not just annoying, it's destructive. Wood rots, fire dies, blankets soak, spirits break. So as soon as a few more people notice the drip, the house snaps into motion, like a colony of smoky ants. Someone barks an order. A boy scrambles up the ladder toward the rafters with a bundle of old rags in one hand and what looks like a dead squirrel in the other. You assume the rags are for plugging leaks, and the squirrel is his comfort item or bait. Honestly, you don't ask questions anymore. Then comes the worst part. You're handed a bucket, not to catch water inside, but to carry mud outside. You're now part of the impromptu roofing crew. Congratulations. The outside is a wall of wind and wet snow now turning to slush. The Longhouse roof, when viewed up close, is a nightmare of lumpy sod, patches of moss, and questionable choices. You're directed to a spot where the turf has started to peel back, exposing the woven sticks beneath. It looks like a thatched pizza slowly falling apart. You're handed a crude shovel, a sharpened plank really, and pointed toward the pile of fresh turf. Someone yells something encouraging, possibly. More likely it was a threat. As you drag heavy dripping slabs of sod up a slippery ladder, you learn an important fact. Viking Longhouse roofs were incredibly high maintenance. They were genius in theory, insulated, weatherproof and fairly fire resistant, but they required constant repair. Moss, turf and birch bark had to be replaced often, and the weight of snow could collapse entire sections if left too long. Vikings didn't build things and forget about them. They built them and then babysat them for life. Quirky fact for today: some households would actually plant flowers or herbs in their turf roofs, not just for aesthetics, although who doesn't love a pop of colour in their misery, but also because certain plants repelled insects or absorbed extra moisture. Imagine living in a house that literally grows things on its head. You, of course, are just trying not to fall off it. The turf is heavy and awkward, especially when wet. You slap it into place, try to press it down with your frozen fingers, and immediately get a mouthful of snowflakes and dirt. Someone up there laughs. You don't look. You're afraid if you make eye contact, they'll challenge you to a duel or a drinking contest, and you'd lose both before noon. You work in miserable silence, hands going numb, neck soaked through. Every time you shift your weight, you feel the roof creak just slightly beneath your feet, reminding you that ancient structural engineering didn't account for panic attacks. You manage to pat down one patch, then another, until the leak seems to stop, or at least slow down to a discouraging trickle. It's not victory, but it's not drowning either. Eventually someone calls you down. You climb back inside, your boots now twice their weight, your body screaming in places you didn't know had nerve endings. You collapse near the fire again, dripping turf juice and failure. No one congratulates you. No one even looks up. But one old man gives a single, almost imperceptible nod as he pours water into a pot. You hold on to that like it's a trophy. You sit in your soggy tunic, hair wild, face streaked with mud, and wonder how many more things can go wrong before the sun sets. You haven't eaten since that porridge of doom. You haven't changed clothes. You haven't sat in real silence. Every inch of your body either itches, aches, or is cold in a new and creatively cruel way. This might be a good time to mention the ongoing scholarly debate about communal versus personal maintenance in longhouses. Some historians argue that each member of a Viking household had set roles and daily tasks, sort of a rugged division of labour. Others believe responsibilities were more fluid, determined by who was available and physically capable on a given day. Either way, you're clearly being evaluated with every assignment, and right now you're not exactly earning gold stars. You stretch your legs out toward the fire and immediately get barked at by the same woman from earlier, the one who runs this place like a CEO with a cleaver. She points at your boots, then at the door. You realise with horror that you've tracked half the roof sludge into the house. You scramble up and start scrubbing the floor with a rag that's less cloth and more concept. Snorri the goat wanders over and steps in your wet trail, then kicks some of it back onto your pants. You can't even be mad anymore. You just smile and whisper, "Of course you did," like it's a sitcom, and the goat is the chaotic side character. By the time the floor is acceptable again, you're ready to collapse. But there's still half a day ahead. A long, unrelenting half day. You sit back down, steal a few spoonfuls from someone's leftover stew, and try to zone out while staring into the fire. You watch a spark drift up into the smoke hole and imagine it carrying your soul with it. You're not the only one dragging. Around the longhouse, people are stretched out, half asleep, quietly sharpening tools or mending clothing. The wind outside howls, but inside the rhythm has slowed to a dull hum. The fire pops and groans, and for a few minutes it's as close to peace as you're going to get. Then something crashes outside, loud, metallic. A shout goes up and everyone snaps to attention. Because of course, the day's not over. You barely make it to your feet before someone is already halfway to the door, throwing on a fur cloak and grabbing what can only be described as a battle rake. Another shout rings out, closer this time, urgent, angry. You glance around, hoping someone will stop and explain what's happening, but no one does. You're not in the loop, remember? You're the foreign body in the system, the stowaway in this time machine. Everyone else seems to know what to do. Grab tools, run outside, brace for chaos. You naturally follow, because what else are you going to do? Hide under Snorri? The second you step out into the light, or what passes for daylight in this eternal grey, you feel it. Not the cold, though that's always there. No, this is tension, like the air itself has caught its breath. About a dozen villagers are running toward the animal pen behind the longhouse, all shouting in various flavours of alarm. You trail behind, slipping in the snow, still clutching the sad remains of your tunic around you like it might help. And then you see it. One of the larger pigs, massive, tusked, and clearly filled with existential rage, has broken loose. It's galloping around the yard like a furry battering ram, knocking over barrels, grunting with the fury of a demon in midlife crisis. Two goats are screaming. A child is crying. One man is limping away with a bleeding shin. Someone throws a stick. The pig does not care. The pig is a god now. You freeze, unsure of your role. Are you supposed to tackle it? Scare it? Speak gently to it like it's a misunderstood spirit? A woman shoves a long branch into your hands and points toward the beast. The message is clear. Help or get out of the way. You inch forward, heart pounding, stick trembling. The pig sees you. You see the pig. There's a beat of mutual confusion, and then it charges. Not at you, thankfully, but right past you, close enough to splash you with something warm and definitely unpleasant. You yelp and spin, slipping on the ice and going down like a sack of wet laundry. You lie there for a moment, breathing hard, staring at the sky, wondering if this counts as a near-death experience. Technically, yes. Eventually they corner the pig near the woodshed. A group of villagers surrounds it with spears, ropes, and sheer willpower. After a few tense minutes of grunting and shouting and the kind of language that definitely wouldn't make it past YouTube moderation, the pig is lassoed and dragged back to the pen, still snorting but somewhat defeated. Everyone cheers, or at least exhales. You push yourself up, brushing snow and mystery fluid off your back. A teen passes by and says something that might be a compliment or an insult. You nod and pretend it's the first one. Here's your historical moment of the day. Pigs in Viking society were more than just meat. They were wealth, status symbols, sometimes even sacrifices to the gods. Losing one, or worse, having it destroy half your yard, was a big deal. Boars especially were associated with Freyr, a fertility god. So yes, you just got taken down by a holy pig. That's going in your saga. Now for the fringe fact. There's some speculation that wild pigs in Viking territories weren't entirely domesticated. Some households let their pigs roam semi-free, foraging in forests, returning only when called or corralled. So there's a non-zero chance that the beast you just nearly died under was part pet, part feral legend. Think Viking emotional support animal, but with tusks. You limp back toward the longhouse, covered in shame and pork residue, and notice several people giving you side eyes. It's hard to tell if they're amused, disgusted, or both. Someone offers you a ladle of warm broth. You take it without making eye contact. The taste is rich. Bone, herbs, possibly turnip, and it goes down like life support. You sit near the wall, sipping slowly, trying to recover your dignity one spoonful at a time. Inside, the atmosphere has shifted. There's more movement now, post-pig adrenaline maybe. People talking, exchanging short bursts of laughter. The old man with the squirrel beard is retelling the moment the pig nearly gored a chicken, complete with hand gestures and sound effects. You are thankfully not mentioned. Let's shift gears. Ever wonder how Vikings kept their longhouses from descending into chaos without Netflix or therapy? Simple. Structure and shared suffering. Everyone had a role. Even you, however poorly you performed it, are now officially known as that one who got tackled by the pig. It's not respect exactly, but it's a place in the narrative, which honestly is half the battle. Inside, someone starts pulling out tools. Not weapons, but actual tools. Carving knives, awls, bits of bone and antler. It's craft time in the Viking house. The midday lull has given way to soft focus. You watch as a woman carves intricate knotwork into the handle of a spoon. A boy is threading sinew through a piece of fur, probably sewing boots. A girl sits cross-legged near the fire, twisting flax into thread with the same concentration you reserve for diffusing drama in a group chat. Crafting wasn't just busy work, it was survival. Everything had to be made by hand. Clothing, tools, utensils, shelters, even art. There were no stores, no 2-day shipping. You needed something, you built it, or bartered for it, or stole it, but that's a different episode. Here's the ongoing scholarly squabble. Were Viking households mostly self-sufficient, or did they rely heavily on trade and community? The truth is likely both. Smaller homesteads had to produce as much as they could, but larger, settlements and chieftain halls traded goods across vast networks, sometimes as far as the Middle East. But even in longhouses far from trade routes, crafting wasn't optional. It was embedded into daily life like eating or breathing or avoiding pigs. You're handed a small jagged piece of bone and a knife. The silent message, carve something. You stare at it, unsure if you're being tested or just gently bullied. You try carving a rune. It comes out looking like a sad stick figure falling over. A child walks by, sees your work and giggles. You pretend you meant it that way. It's a rune of humility. You sit there, fire crackling, breath visible in the dim light, and keep carving. Not well, but honestly. It's strangely calming. This repetitive scrape, scrape, scrape of bone under blade. Your hands are raw, your clothes damp, and your pride tattered, but you're doing something real. And for a brief moment, that's enough. Until someone says your name, or what passes for your name, and points toward the door again. You freeze, knife mid-air. The man gestures more urgently this time, then mimes a rowing motion. You blink. Rowing? He nods. Oh no, rowing. You were really hoping you misread that pantomime, but no. Within minutes you're being marched down to the shoreline with a handful of burly men, a handful of burlier teenagers, and the one child who has a knife collection bigger than your personality. You try to blend in, keeping your head down, but that's hard when you're wearing a damp tunic that smells like swamp yogurt, and you keep stumbling on rocks like a baby deer in Crocs. Nobody laughs. That might have been comforting if they hadn't looked so disappointed instead. The longship sits half-beached at the edge of the icy fjord like some massive dormant sea dragon. You've seen pictures of Viking longships before, sleek, ornate, almost romantic. But up close, it's just a huge, intimidating piece of wood that's clearly going to ruin your shoulders. It rocks gently in the shallows, already half-loaded with crates, bundles of rope, and a giant sack that's probably fish or treasure, or something more alive than you want it to be. One of the older men shouts a command. Everyone splits off in practiced motion. You are not part of that practice. You step to the side, hands awkwardly at your hips, trying to look useful. A boy shoves an oar into your chest so hard you nearly fall backward. He points at the ship. You get it. Get in. Row. Don't die. Clambering aboard is not graceful. The sides are high and there's no ladder, just sheer Viking upper body power. You scramble up like a raccoon trying to board a school bus, landing with a wet thud on the wooden planks. The boat smells like brine, tar, and old sweat. You sit at your assigned bench, your oar awkwardly across your lap, trying not to cry or vomit or both. Now, a little historical grounding while your dignity dissolves. Viking longships weren't just war machines. They were lifelines. These boats carried people, animals, goods, and sometimes entire families across fjords, down rivers, and across the sea to places like Britain, Ireland, even North Africa. They were fast, flexible, and designed to navigate both open water and shallow streams. But they didn't move themselves. That part, that's where you come in. Rowing, you quickly learn, is not a chill group bonding activity. It's an act of pure medieval suffering. The oar is longer than you are. The handle splinters into your palms, and once the signal is given, a guttural shout from the front. Everyone starts pulling in rhythm, which means you have to start too. You dig the blade into the freezing water, pull, and feel your spine scream. It's not just physical pain, it's emotional. Every tug of the oar drags your soul a little closer to quitting. The boat moves steadily, but the cold wind blasts your face like it's trying to erase it. Water splashes over the sides, soaking your knees. Your breath fogs in front of you in rapid, panicked puffs. Someone behind you grunts like a walrus. Someone ahead spits over the side, narrowly missing your foot. You're in Viking cardio hell. Quirky fact of the day. Some Viking longships had musical rowing rhythms, someone beating a drum or chanting to keep everyone in sync. Not this one. Here, it's all instinct and angry grunting. You try to match the pace, but keep falling slightly offbeat. The oar slaps the side of the boat. A man glares at you like you've insulted his entire bloodline. You whisper an apology that no one hears. The boat rounds a bend, moving deeper into the fjord. The snow has stopped for now, but the sky's low and heavy, a ceiling of iron clouds. On either side, jagged cliffs rise up, streaked with ice and shadow. It's beautiful in that hostile, no one cares if you live kind of way. You wish you could enjoy the view, but your arms are noodles and your butt has gone numb. You glance to your left. The teenage girl rowing beside you looks half your size but twice as terrifying. Her sleeves are rolled up, arms roped with muscle, and she's not even sweating. She catches you looking and raises an eyebrow. You look away fast, almost dropping your oar. Now let's wade into a scholarly debate. Who actually rowed these ships? Some historians argue that only warriors or full-time sailors manned the longships, especially on raiding expeditions. Others say rowing was a communal skill, learned by farmers, merchants, even teens when needed. Given your current situation, being forced to row alongside a 13-year-old who could crush your spine, it seems the latter holds water, literally. After what feels like a lifetime and a half, the boat finally slows. Another shout. Everyone pulls in their oars with a motion so synchronized it looks choreographed. You try to follow and nearly smack yourself in the face. The boat drifts toward a rocky beach where 2 more villagers are waiting with bundles of kindling and what appears to be a dead deer. Cargo pickup. Great. You all disembark. Another awkward flail down onto slippery rocks. You're told to help with the deer. It's large, it's heavy, and you're not emotionally prepared to touch something that was recently alive and very majestic. But there's no room for squeamishness here. You grab a hind leg, heave with everything you've got, and shuffle the carcass up onto the deck like it's just another Tuesday, which for them, it is. Quirky side note. Viking boats weren't just vehicles, they were floating marketplaces. Villagers often used them to trade with neighbouring settlements, delivering everything from furs to tools to, fresh kills. Long before Amazon Prime, this was how supply chains worked. Wet, cold, and covered in deer blood. You spend another hour rowing back. Your body is giving up. Your arms are jelly, your legs shaky, your face windburnt. At one point you catch yourself half hallucinating that you're back in your apartment, sipping coffee and watching old sitcoms. The vision fades when you get splashed in the face with brackish water, and remember, no sitcom ever included this much livestock and suffering. Finally the Longhouse comes into view. Smoke curling lazily from its roof, snow glinting on the timbers, the doorway flanked by its usual skulls. You never thought you'd be so happy to see that smoggy little death trap. The boat scrapes onto the shore. You try to stand and your knees buckle. Someone laughs. Probably the girl, maybe the goat in disguise. Back inside you're given a ladle of soup. Bland, greasy, glorious. You slurp it like it's the nectar of the gods, then curl up near the fire, arms limp at your sides. No one says anything, but someone drops a fur over your shoulders. It's not comfort, it's not warmth, it's acknowledgement. You're still not one of them. But you're not nothing anymore either. You wake up coughing again, this time from a different angle. You're lying sideways, barely under the fur, face pressed into the dirt floor that now has a faint crust of frost. The fire's burned low, just embers now, and the familiar haze of wood smoke has thickened into something like a living thing. It curls along the beams and hangs heavy in the stale morning air, clawing into your lungs like an invisible animal. You roll over and immediately regret it. Your joints feel like someone filled them with gravel. Your left arm is completely dead from sleeping on it. And your nose, leaking like an overworked roof tile. But that's not what really wakes you. It's the itch. At first you think maybe it's just your clothes. This tunic still has the texture of woven bark and poor decisions. But no, this itch is moving, crawling, multiplying. You scratch the back of your neck and come away with something that doesn't feel like it belongs. You freeze, you scratch again, lower this time, along your ribs. Same sensation. Then it hits you. Lice. You try not to scream. You absolutely do not succeed. Across the room, a woman gives you a bored glance, then returns to stirring a pot of whatever horrifying breakfast is cooking today. A man by the wall snorts, probably amused by your modern breakdown, and a small child walks past, picking something out of their own hair and flicking it into the fire like it's just part of the morning routine, which in fact it is. Congratulations. You're officially a member of Viking society. You've got the parasites to prove it. Now, historically speaking, hygiene in Viking households wasn't nearly as awful as some of their medieval neighbours, but by your standards, it's a full-blown dermatological horror show. Vikings bathed weekly, on Saturdays, hence the Old Norse word logadaga, or washing day, which was pretty clean for the era. But washing didn't mean sterilisation. Lice, fleas, and even mange mites were common. People dealt with them the same way they dealt with everything else. Gritted teeth, sharp tools, and a lot of mutual scratching. You're handed a comb, a narrow, bone-carved, double-sided contraption with teeth so fine it could slice atoms. It's been used before, many, many times. You try not to think about who else has combed what with it. You drag it through your hair and immediately feel it catch. You pause, then pull. The snap of resistance makes your eyes water. You check the comb. Yep, movement. Tiny. Horrible. You glance around. No one else is even flinching. The girl who rode beside you yesterday is running the same kind of comb through her braids with the same energy you used to check your phone in the morning. A man plucks something off his beard and flicks it away. You suddenly understand why so many Norsemen kept their heads shaved under those trendy braids, easier pest control. And here's your quirky fact for the day. Some Viking graves have been found with combs placed alongside the dead, right next to weapons and jewellery. Apparently, even in death, you didn't want to look like a flea motel. You take your turn at the wash basin, a half barrel of grimy, lukewarm water near the door. It smells like soapwort and possibly feet. You splash your face, rub your neck, scrub under your arms with what might be a rag or might be an old sock. Either way, you're cleaner now, in the same way that a dish is clean after being wiped with a greasy napkin. It's a win. You'll take it. Back by the fire, the breakfast cauldron has reached peak flavour. Today's dish smells faintly of cabbage, meat and something pungent. You're given a bowl. You don't ask questions. It's warm. It fills your stomach. That's enough. Then comes your next assignment, woodworking. The same guy who made fun of your rowing now hands you a carving knife and points to a heap of logs. Not firewood. These are smoother, stripped of bark and clearly being prepped for tools or handles. Or, knowing your luck, primitive torture devices. You're expected to whittle one into something vaguely functional. You sit down beside the pile, blade in hand, and begin hacking at the wood like a caveman playing Fruit Ninja. It goes poorly. You slice the tip of your thumb within 5 minutes, and the blood gets immediately soot-stained. You suck at the wound, trying not to look like you're panicking. No one comes to help. This, clearly, is part of the learning curve. And now for our scholarly debate. How hygienic were the Vikings, really? Some evidence suggests they were cleaner than we give them credit for. Grooming tools, public bathhouses, even tweezers and ear picks have been found in burial sites. Other historians argue that the presence of grooming tools doesn't mean daily spa sessions, just basic attempts at dignity in an age of grit and plague. The consensus? They tried. But in a world without disinfectant, shampoo or climate control, trying only gets you so far. You whittle, you suck at it, but you keep going. The wood chips pile up at your feet. You pretend your ragged mess is a spoon. Someone glances over, smirks, and says something that might mean spoon or might mean why are you still alive? Either way, you nod politely and hold it up like you meant to do that. You spend hours this way, cutting, scraping, bleeding slightly. It's oddly meditative, like ancient therapy through mild suffering. The rhythm of carving, the soft murmurs of people around you, the low rumble of fire and snoring, and an occasional goat scream in the distance. It's the closest thing to calm you've felt since arriving. Eventually you stretch, wipe your hands on your tunic and glance outside. The sky's finally clearing. A thin band of blue pushes through the grey. It lasts only a few seconds, but it feels like someone cracked the lid on the world. Then someone walks past you holding a dead rat by the tail. They throw it into a pot near the door. You blink, look around. No one reacts. You think, surely that's not dinner, right? You keep your eyes on the rat pot for a solid 30 seconds, hoping, praying, that someone's going to say, relax, it's just bait for traps. Or, that was a mistake, put it in the compost. But no, the woman stirring the pot doesn't even blink. She just pushes it deeper with a ladle and carries on like it's Tuesday, which it is, apparently. The smell shifts slightly, gaining an earthy, iron-rich note that wasn't there before. You close your eyes. You try not to breathe. You fail. No one seems disturbed, and that might be the most disturbing part. A nearby man tears off a chunk of bread, dips it into his own bowl of stew, probably not rat, probably, and slurps it down. Across from him, a girl with dirt-smudged cheeks and the coldest eyes you've ever seen is sewing what looks like a wolf paw into a glove. You're surrounded by people who could probably eat roadkill, tame a bear, and solve a conflict with a single headbutt. And here you are, quietly panicking about rodent soup and wondering how far it is to the nearest McDonald's. 1,000 years, give or take. Someone claps you on the back. It's the elderly man with the twisted pinky finger and eyebrows that look like they belong to a frost giant. He gestures toward the roof, points at a coil of rope, then at a stack of turf slabs outside. Apparently the snowstorm from 2 days ago dislodged another section of roof, and guess what? You're on patch duty again. Your body groans in protest, but your mouth says nothing. Saying no is not an option here. Ever. You trudge outside into air so cold it feels like punishment. The wind is behaving for now, no biting gales, just a steady, bone-deep chill that feels like it's been personally tailored to your misery. You drag the slabs over one by one, up the ladder, and onto the roof. There, you try to fit them together like a puzzle made entirely of dirt, moss, and malice. The cold makes your fingers stiff and clumsy. You drop one. It lands squarely on your foot. You don't scream out loud, but inside your soul combusts. As you work, you notice something else. 2 ravens circling overhead. They're massive, black as midnight, wings slicing the sky in lazy spirals. One of them lands on a nearby tree, cocking its head as it watches you fumble with turf and twine. For a split second, you wonder if it's Hugin or Munin, Odin's legendary ravens, the watchers and whisperers. Then the bird squawks, poops, and flies off. You're probably not chosen, but who knows? Maybe Odin has a sense of humour. Historical side note. Ravens were more than birds to the Vikings. They were omens, messengers, symbols of wisdom and death. Warriors painted them on shields. Skalds wove them into sagas. Seeing one was never just a bird. It was a sign. You don't know what today's sign means, but it probably involves pain. You finish the patching just as the wind picks up again. Perfect timing. Your sleeves are soaked, your boots are ruined, and your knees feel like they've aged several decades in an afternoon. You climb down the ladder with the grace of someone actively trying not to break a hip, and stagger back into the longhouse. Inside, things have changed. The atmosphere is tense. People are gathered around the central fire in tight clusters, whispering. There's no laughter now, no idle banter. The chieftain, the one with the braided beard that reaches his belt, is seated at the high seat, flanked by 2 grim-looking warriors. One of them is sharpening a blade, slowly, deliberately, with the kind of eye contact that makes your skin crawl. Someone's missing. You glance around. Then you hear it, a faint wailing from the far end of the room. You shuffle closer and see a woman rocking back and forth, arms wrapped around herself. Her face is streaked with tears and ash. An older woman, maybe her mother, sits beside her, expression unreadable. You don't ask what happened. You just know. The young man with the fishing spear didn't come back. It was supposed to be a simple trip, a day out along the coast, hauling nets, checking traps. But the sea doesn't care about supposed to. Sometimes it just takes. Maybe a sudden wave, maybe a cracked hull, maybe the gods were bored. Whatever it was, the result is the same. He's gone, and everyone knows it. Here comes the historical gut punch. Viking life was short, and it was brutal. Drowning was one of the most common causes of death, especially for younger men. Even the best sailors could vanish in seconds. Families learned to live with the possibility that any farewell might be final, and grief wasn't hidden. It was worn, raw and open, like a wound. Rituals would follow. Songs maybe. Offerings. A carved marker near the sea. You sit by the fire, trying to shrink into yourself. You didn't know him, but his absence feels loud. People shift around you. Someone passes you a carved horn filled with a dark, bitter mead. You drink it without thinking, the alcohol burning a slow path down your throat. It doesn't help. Not really. But at least it gives your hand something to do. Quirky fact time. Some Viking families would set a place at the fire for the recently deceased, believing their spirit lingered nearby for a time. Food would be offered. Names would be spoken in full, silence was respected. You glance at the empty space beside the grieving mother. There's a bowl of stew there, untouched. Later, after the initial mourning has cooled into quiet, people begin to drift into evening routines again. Someone resumes mending a net. Someone else feeds the goats. The girl who was sewing wolf paws earlier now sits silently, her hand still. Even the child with the knife has tucked it away. You get pulled into the process of lighting the oil lamps. Tiny flickers of flame that somehow manage to push back the dark, if only a little. The lamps are carved from stone and filled with tallow. You spill a little on your fingers and nearly burn yourself lighting the wick. It's fine. Everything stings now anyway. Here's today's scholarly debate. How did Viking communities handle grief and death in everyday life? We know about grand ship burials and cremations, but less about the quiet domestic mourning that happened in longhouses like this one. Some scholars believe death was a shared experience, deeply woven into the rhythm of life. Others argue that grief was expressed in personal, private rituals that varied from household to household. What's clear is that no one here is untouched by it. As night falls, the longhouse grows even dimmer. Shadows stretch across the rafters. The fire is fed again. The same woman from this morning ladles out a thick stew. You accept your bowl and take a bite before remembering the rat. You pause. Look at her. She holds your gaze for a second, calm, unreadable, then moves on. You finish your bowl, whatever it is, you needed it. You're halfway through scraping the crusted stew from the inside of your bowl when a heavy hand drops onto your shoulder. You look up, instantly tense, already preparing to apologize for something you didn't do, or did badly. But the man above you is grinning, wide, beard-splitting grin, with half a tooth missing and the kind of energy that only comes from mead, adrenaline, or deeply misguided optimism. He slaps your back again, hard enough to make your ribs question their life choices, then makes a swinging motion with his arm. You try to interpret this. Are you in trouble? Is he challenging you to a duel? No, wait. He's miming a weapon. A sword. Or, oh no, an axe. He points to the wall where a row of tools and weapons hang in a crooked line. Long-handled axes, short-handled hatchets, hammers, and a few blades so ancient they might as well have been carved out of mountain rage. He makes the swinging motion again, then jerks his thumb toward the door. You're going outside. With an axe. You follow the group hesitantly, your stomach churning with a new and exciting blend of rat stew, fear, and mead. The snow crunches beneath your boots, and the wind has taken on a more playful tone, less like a knife and more like a slap. It's almost cheerful in its coldness, like it knows you're about to humiliate yourself. In a small clearing behind the longhouse, a target has been set up. It's not a straw dummy or a bullseye painted on a board. It's a log. A wide, round stump of tree balanced upright, scarred from 1,000 impacts. Deep notches pucker its surface like battle wounds. One axe is already embedded in it, buried so deep it hums slightly in the wood. The man hands you a throwing axe. It's heavy. Surprisingly so. The blade is broad, slightly rusted, and shines with cold menace. The handle is worn smooth from use, the kind of tool that's seen more action than you'll ever be comfortable with. You step up. You stare at the target. You remember every movie you've ever seen where someone throws a weapon perfectly and everyone cheers. You lift the axe and promptly hurl it sideways, where it bounces off a rock, lands in a snowbank, and nearly decapitates a chicken. There is silence. Then someone laughs. Then everyone does. You flush hot, embarrassed. But the mood is light. They're not mocking you. They're enjoying the show. You just became the warm-up act for the real entertainment. One by one, others take turns throwing axes. Some hit the target with loud, satisfying thuds. Others miss and pretend they meant to. It's less of a contest and more of a bonding ritual. You're invited to try again, and again. The third time, your axe actually hits the log. Not the centre, not even close, but it sticks. You turn, waiting for applause. What you get is a small nod from the man who dragged you out here. That's better than a cheer. That's approval. Let's talk facts. Viking. Warriors, real warriors, not freezing time travelling YouTubers, trained constantly. Axes were common weapons, not just for battle but for everyday use. While swords were considered prestigious, axes were democratic. Everyone had one. Some were tools, others were art. There were throwing axes like the one you just launched into paltry airspace, and massive two-handed bearded axes meant for cleaving enemies or possibly trees in half. Quirky detail. Certain axe designs were so unique to Scandinavia that archaeologists can often tell where a Viking raider came from just by looking at the curve of his weapon. It's like regional dialects, but for chopping things. You're shown other techniques too. How to hold a shield properly, how to feint, how not to decapitate yourself mid-swing. The teens in the group take it very seriously. One girl slices a branch out of the air with a move so fluid you're not sure it actually happened. You just stare at the floating wood chips like, that's not legal. Then comes the announcement. The chieftain's son, tall, serious, built like a boulder in a tunic, stands in front of the group and says something that makes everyone go quiet. Then they cheer. Even the old woman with the death stare smile claps once. You ask someone nearby what was just said. They hesitate, then mutter, "We raid tomorrow." Ah, that explains the mood shift. You're not sure what kind of raid this is, territorial, retaliatory, opportunistic. But it doesn't matter. A longship's going out. That means gear must be checked, weapons sharpened, offerings made, animals slaughtered, and every single person gets involved. Even those who stay behind, this is not a drill. Now here comes the scholarly fork in the road. Were Viking raids always about pillaging? The answer is, kind of. Some were politically motivated. Land disputes, debt collection, displays of power. Others were pure economics. You raid a monastery, steal gold and livestock, and maybe take a few captives to sell or keep. Some raids were just about making a statement. We're still here, we still have axes, don't get comfortable. As someone who has trouble opening jam jars, this revelation does not thrill you. Back inside, the mood is electric. People are packing, sharpening, preparing. The Longhouse is loud again. Not festive, but energised. Men wrap their blades in fur and hide. Women pack extra food, bundle herbs, prepare charms. Children scurry between boots and gear, ducking beneath swinging scabbards. You find yourself roped into helping prep dried meats. It's a miserable job. The jerky is tough as rawhide, sliced into strips so leathery they bounce when you drop them. Your fingers ache from the salt, and the knife you're given is so dull it might actually be a spoon with ambition. But here's the thing, you're being trusted. Even if only with food prep, it's something. You're part of the machine now. A squeaky, confused cog, yes, but a cog nonetheless. Later, when the preparations pause for a meal, you're invited to sit slightly closer to the hearth. Not in the inner ring, not near the high seat, but not at the door anymore. You sit, hands wrapped around a hot bowl of broth, and listen to the quiet murmurs of strategy. Who will row? Who will stay? What will be offered to the gods? Then someone passes you a bundle. Inside it, an oiled leather tunic, thick, patched, ugly, and sized, roughly for you. You're not sure what it means, but you wear it anyway. The tunic feels like wearing a wet tarp that's been stored under a bear for a few months. It's heavy, stiff in all the wrong places, and smells unmistakably of old fish and something smoky. Maybe seal fat. You slide it over your shoulders anyway because someone handed it to you like it mattered. And that means it does. It's not new, nothing here is, but it's whole, which feels like a luxury. The leather creaks as you shift, and you swear you can hear your dignity trying to crawl out the door. You're not told what to do next. You just watch and mimic. The others are sharpening blades with stones worn smooth from use. One man oils his sword while humming tunelessly, like it's a lullaby for violence. A teenager with a jawline sharp enough to cut meat is carefully stitching her name rune into the inside of her tunic. You glance down at your borrowed armour, wondering whose rune it once held, whose sweat is still woven into its seams. You're not technically part of the raiding crew, that's clear. No one says it outright, but they don't hand you a sword either. Instead, you're given a sack filled with supplies and pointed toward a stack of gear that needs to be loaded onto the ship. You're in the support squad, the unpaid roadie for the Viking band of mayhem. You follow the others down to the shoreline again, this time dragging bundles wrapped in hide sealed with tar and twine. Inside? You don't ask. Could be rope, fish, salted meat. Could be the bones of a rival. Everything here is utilitarian and also a little ominous. The longship sits at the edge of the water, its carved dragon-head bow leering silently into the wind. In the grey early light, it doesn't look majestic. It looks hungry. You and the others pile supplies on board. The boat rocks with every step, and your legs are still sore from yesterday's rowing fiasco, but you manage not to fall in the water. Small victories. Once everything's loaded, the warriors walk a slow circle around the ship. One by one, they touch the hull. Some whisper, some spit. One woman presses a small charm, carved bone, strung with red thread, into a crack in the boards. You realise they're blessing it, offering protection, or maybe asking permission. That's your historical fact today. Vikings didn't just build boats, they believed in them. Ships had spirits, personalities. Some were considered lucky, others cursed. Before long voyages or raids, it was common to offer sacrifices, often in the form of food, sometimes blood. They'd pour mead over the deck, bury amulets beneath the mast, or dedicate the journey to a specific god. The ship wasn't just transport. It was an extension of the crew. The chieftain arrives last. Everyone goes quiet. He steps aboard, nods once, and that's it. No big speech. No rousing anthem. Just a nod. You feel the collective inhale. The readiness. They've done this before. They've lost people before, but still, they go. As the raiding party pushes the ship out into deeper water, those staying behind gather along the shore. No waving, no sobbing, just watching. You stand among them, awkward and underdressed, trying to make yourself smaller. The wind picks up, tugging at cloaks and beards and the edges of your hood. The longship slides out across the fjord like it belongs to the sea more than the land. And maybe it does. Once it's gone, the silence stretches. Then someone turns and says, "Time to work." Because of course, the warriors leave, but the world doesn't pause. If anything, things get harder. With so many strong arms now rowing toward potential death, the remaining people, mostly older folks, women, and those considered too soft or injured, have to do everything else. You very clearly fall into that too soft category. You're sent to help with the livestock, which sounds cute, until you realise it involves elbow-deep slop and a ram with a personal vendetta. The pens are muddy and rank, and the animals have no fear of you. One goose chases you for 20 minutes just because it can. You slip in something you hope is just mud and get headbutted by a sheep that looks like it moonlights as a debt collector. By midday, you're soaked, sore, and wondering how anyone here ever finds time to think. Everything is constant. Movement, noise, tasks. There's no "I'll get to it later" in a longhouse. There's only now, or someone else does it. Or it doesn't get done and then something dies. That's the math. In the afternoon, you're pulled into weaving duty. Not because you have talent, trust me you don't, but because you have fingers and no immediate injury. You sit beside two older women who speak little, but glance at your work with increasing despair. You try to mimic their movements on the loom, threading coarse wool through rough wooden frames. It's slow, painfully so, but eventually you manage something that looks vaguely like fabric. Quirky fact, Norse textiles were vital to survival and status. Everyone wore wool. The wealthier wore fine linen or imported silk if they could get it, but that was rare. Most households had to spin and weave their own cloth, from shearing to dyeing. Colours weren't just for fun, they were social signals. Deep blue, you had trade connections. Red, you probably knew a dyer. And brown. Well, brown was the sweatpants of Viking fashion. You're wearing brown, obviously. As evening settles in, the longhouse becomes heavy with the smell of meat. A pig has been slaughtered. One of the less emotional ones, thankfully. And the air fills with roasting fat and sizzling skin. It's the kind of scent that bypasses thought and goes straight to your primal core. You haven't been this hungry in a while. Not the "I skipped lunch" hungry, the kind that makes you contemplate chewing on your sleeve. When the food is served, it's quieter than usual. No one talks much. The absence of the raiding crew hangs like mist. People eat quickly, efficiently. You get your bowl and sit near the fire again, close enough to feel included, far enough not to assume anything. And that's when the children arrive. Not like a stampede, more like a slow migration. Small figures creep out from corners and crawl spaces drawn by the warmth. They sit in clusters. Some lean against adults. Some curl up like kittens. A boy with a scar over his eyebrow sits beside you without asking. You offer him a chunk of your meat. He takes it, doesn't thank you, but stays. Then the stories begin. Not loud ones. Not the kind you tell to entertain. These are murmured legends, passed from adult to child in tones that mix memory with myth. Tales of frost giants, sea serpents, and the All-Father watching from his high seat in Asgard. A woman speaks of a man who walked into a storm and returned with the ability to speak with birds. A man tells of a warrior who dreamed his own death and welcomed it when it came, smiling. You sit still, listening, watching. The fire crackles. The walls feel closer. The longhouse is no longer just a shelter. It's a container of memory, a keeper of voices that echo from throat to throat, fire to fire, across years and winters and generations. Tonight, you are not in the way. You are simply there, listening, and that's enough. You wake the next morning with a splitting headache and the distinct feeling that you've aged about 40 years overnight. Your back has become one long cold ache, and your hips feel like they've been fighting each other in your sleep. You try to roll over, but there's a sharp object in your side. A small toy horse, hand-carved, probably left behind by one of the many children that now freely roam your sleeping space like it's a community playground. You toss it gently aside and sit up, stretching slowly while every joint cracks like firewood. The longhouse is already stirring, or rather, it never really stopped. People come and go all night, stoking the fire, checking on livestock, walking outside to relieve themselves in the pit that absolutely does not smell better in daylight. You've stopped expecting rest. You now aim for brief moments of lying flat without immediate discomfort. That counts as sleep here. You head for the wash basin, or what passes for it. The water's already sludgy, floating with suspicious flecks of dirt, hair, and maybe part of a turnip. You splash your face anyway. There's no mirror. You don't need one. You already know what you look like. Soggy raccoon with regret-themed fashion sense. Breakfast, again, is porridge. Of course it is. Grey, thick, and, what's this? Flavoured with berries today. Small mercies. You sit near the fire, steaming bowl in hand, and eat slowly while the rest of the household mills around. The mood is quiet. Not sad exactly, but restrained. The longship won't return for days, maybe weeks, and until then, everything is a little tenser. Lighter footsteps, fewer jokes, a sense that everyone's keeping one ear turned toward the wind. As you're finishing your meal, someone clears their throat behind you. You turn and see a man who looks vaguely like a tree that learned how to walk. His beard is shot through with white, his shoulders wide as an ox yoke. He's not the chieftain, but he sits close to the high seat when everyone gathers. He gestures for you to follow. You do. You expect to be sent on some errand involving livestock entrails or rethatching the latrine roof, but instead you're led to a quiet corner where a group of people are seated on benches, furs draped across their laps, bowls of something steaming in hand. They glance at you, not coldly, not warmly, just acknowledging. You recognise a few. The woman who sews leather like it's silk, the man who carved a comb so intricate it looked machine-made. These are the skilled ones, the ones who make the longhouse run. You're handed a rough wooden dish and a tool, a curved blade honed to a dangerous edge. Today, apparently, you're learning how to scrape hides. The smell hits first. Sharp, acidic, animal. It coats your tongue, makes your eyes water. A freshly skinned deer hide is flopped across a plank of wood, and your job is to remove the remnants, fat, sinew, fur, until it's clean enough to tan. You watch the others for a minute before trying. They move smoothly, efficiently. You do not. Your first few scrapes are either too shallow or too deep, either missing the tissue or tearing holes. The blade slips, nearly taking your thumb with it. No one says a word, they just keep working. You eventually find a rhythm, pull, angle, scrape, pull. Your arms ache, your hands freeze. The hide resists like it has a personal grudge. But gradually the texture changes. You reveal the pale underlayer, the stuff that will one day become clothing, bags, maybe even part of a sail. It's gruesome. It's weirdly satisfying. Here's your historical fact. Vikings were experts in leather and hide work. Every longhouse had someone skilled in the process. They tanned hides using animal brains, ash or urine, whatever worked. Nothing was wasted. A single deer could become food, clothing, tools, glue and thread. You begin to understand that nothing here is one use. Everything has a second life, or a third even, including you. And now, a lovely quirky fact. Some Viking families use dog fur as thread. That's right, dog. Fur spun into yarn and used to reinforce seams. That weird moment when Snorri sheds on your sleeve, historically accurate, slightly gross, deeply efficient. After an hour your shoulders are on fire, you smell like jerky and swamp, and your hands have gone red and raw from the cold. But the man beside you nods once and says a word you don't know. You guess it's something like, good, or maybe not horrible. Either way, you smile. He does not. Lunch is dried fish and a handful of nuts. You chew slowly, trying not to lose a molar. Someone offers you a drink. Watery ale that tastes like barn. But you drink it anyway. You're learning. Nothing is wasted. Everything is earned. Especially calories. Later, you're pulled aside again. This time by the chieftain's wife. She doesn't smile, but she also doesn't stab you, so that's progress. She leads you to the hearth, where a few others are gathered for what seems to be some kind of midwinter preparation ritual. A small iron pot is placed in the coals. Into it goes a mix of herbs, powdered bark, and what might be crushed animal bones. The smell is heady, musky, sharp. almost floral. As the mixture heats, smoke curls upward. People breathe it in, eyes flutter. Some begin to hum. It's not music exactly, but it's close. She hands you a small bundle wrapped in cloth. You open it. Inside, a crude charm made of bone and twine. She taps your chest. You understand. Wear it. You tie it around your neck. It feels like nothing. But the moment it touches your skin, the woman nods, satisfied. Here's the scholarly debate of the day. How much of Viking daily life was truly spiritual? Some historians say every action had religious significance, blessing the tools, whispering to the fire, weaving runes into every stitch. Others argue that daily life was mostly pragmatic, with spiritual rituals saved for big events. But standing there, wrapped in smoke, holding a charm tied with someone's hope, it's hard not to believe the sacred was everywhere. That night, you're invited to sit closer to the hearth than ever before. No high seat, of course. That's for leaders and legends. But you're among the ones who matter now, the ones who contribute. You're given a better bowl, a thicker piece of meat. Someone even laughs at a thing you say. Maybe not kindly, but still, a laugh. When the fire dims and people settle into the edges of sleep, you stay seated for a long time. The charm around your neck is warm from your skin. You smell like tanned hide and ash and whatever strange incense was in that pot. And for the first time, you don't feel like you're visiting a reenactment. You feel like you've always lived here. You wake the next morning with a splitting headache and the distinct feeling that you've aged about 40 years overnight. Your back has become one long cold ache, and your hips feel like they've been fighting each other in your sleep. You try to roll over, but there's a sharp object in your side. A small toy horse. Hand-carved, probably left behind by one of the many children that now freely roam your sleeping space like it's a community playground. You toss it gently aside and sit up, stretching slowly while every joint cracks like firewood. The Longhouse is already stirring, or rather, it never really stopped. People come and go all night, stoking the fire, checking on livestock, walking outside to relieve themselves in the pit that absolutely does not smell better in daylight. You've stopped expecting rest. You now aim for brief moments of lying flat without immediate discomfort. That counts as sleep here. You head for the wash basin, or what passes for it. The water's already sludgy, floating with suspicious flecks of dirt, hair, and maybe part of a turnip. You splash your face anyway. There's no mirror. You don't need one. You already know what you look like. Soggy raccoon with regret-themed fashion sense. Breakfast, again, is porridge. Of course it is. Grey, thick, and, what's this? Flavoured with berries today. Small mercies. You sit near the fire, steaming bowl in hand, and eat slowly while the rest of the household mills around. The mood is quiet. Not sad exactly, but restrained. The long ship won't return for days, maybe weeks, and until then, everything's a little tenser. Lighter footsteps, fewer jokes, a sense that everyone's keeping one ear turned toward the wind. As you're finishing your meal, someone clears their throat behind you. You turn and see a man who looks vaguely like a tree that learned how to walk. His beard is shot through with white, his shoulders wide as an ox yoke. He's not the chieftain, but he sits close to the high seat when everyone gathers. He gestures for you to follow. You do. You expect to be sent on some errand involving livestock entrails or rethatching the latrine roof, but instead you're led to a quiet corner where a group of people are seated on benches, furs draped across their laps, bowls of something steaming in hand. They glance at you, not coldly, not warmly, just acknowledging. You recognise a few. The woman who sews leather like it's silk, the man who carved a comb so intricate it looked machine-made. These are the skilled ones, the ones who make the Longhouse run. You're handed a rough wooden dish and a tool, a curved blade honed to a dangerous edge. Today, apparently, you're learning how to scrape hides. The smell hits first. Sharp, acidic, animal. It coats your tongue, makes your eyes water. A freshly skinned deer hide is flopped across a plank of wood, and your job is to remove the remnants. Fat, sinew, fur, until it's clean enough to tan. You watch the others for a minute before trying. They move smoothly, efficiently. You do not. Your first few scrapes are either too shallow or too deep, either missing the tissue or tearing holes. The blade slips, nearly taking your thumb with it. No one says a word. They just keep working. You eventually find a rhythm. Pull, angle, scrape, pull. Your arms ache. Your hands freeze. The hide resists like it has a personal grudge, but gradually the texture changes. You reveal the pale underlayer, the stuff that will one day become clothing, bags, maybe even part of a sail. It's gruesome. It's weirdly satisfying. Here's your historical fact. Vikings were experts in leather and hide work. Every longhouse had someone skilled in the process. They tanned hides using animal brains, ash or urine, whatever worked. Nothing was wasted. A single deer could become food, clothing, tools, glue and thread. You begin to understand that nothing here is one use. Everything has a second life, or a third even, including you. And now, a lovely quirky fact. Some Viking families used dog fur as thread. That's right, dog fur. Spun into yarn and used to reinforce seams. That weird moment when Snorri sheds on your sleeve. Historically accurate, slightly gross, deeply efficient. After an hour your shoulders are on fire, you smell like jerky and swamp, and your hands have gone red and raw from the cold. But the man beside you nods once and says a word you don't know. You guess it's something like good, or maybe not horrible. Either way you smile, he does not. Lunch is dried fish and a handful of nuts. You chew slowly, trying not to lose a molar. Someone offers you a drink, watery ale that tastes like barn, but you drink it anyway. You're learning. Nothing is wasted. Everything is earned. Especially calories. Later you're pulled aside again, this time by the chieftain's wife. She doesn't smile, but she also doesn't stab you, so that's progress. She leads you to the hearth, where a few others are gathered for what seems to be some kind of midwinter preparation ritual. A small iron pot is placed in the coals. Into it goes a mix of herbs, powdered bark, and what might be crushed animal bones. The smell is heady, musky, sharp, almost floral. As the mixture heats, smoke curls upward. People breathe it in, eyes flutter. Some begin to hum. It's not music exactly, but it's close. She hands you a small bundle wrapped in cloth. You open it. Inside, a crude charm made of bone and twine. She taps your chest. You understand. Wear it. You tie it around your neck. It feels like nothing. But the moment it touches your skin, the woman nods, satisfied. Here's the scholarly debate of the day. How much of Viking daily life was truly spiritual? Some historians say every action had religious significance, blessing the tools, whispering to the fire, weaving runes into every stitch. Others argue that daily life was mostly pragmatic, with spiritual rituals saved for big events. But standing there, wrapped in smoke, holding a charm tied with someone's hope, it's hard not to believe the sacred was everywhere. That night you're invited to sit closer to the hearth than ever before. No high seat of course. That's for leaders and legends. But you're among the ones who matter now, the ones who contribute. You're given a better bowl, a thicker piece of meat. Someone even laughs at a thing you say. Maybe not kindly, but still, a laugh. When the fire dims and people settle into the edges of sleep, you stay seated for a long time. The charm around your neck is warm from your skin. You smell like tanned hide and ash and whatever strange incense was in that pot. And for the first time, you don't feel like you're visiting a reenactment. You feel like you've always lived here. The next morning you wake up half convinced you've finally gone deaf. The Longhouse is so quiet it feels like someone hit the mute button on reality. No crying babies, no snoring warriors, no pig grunts, no creaking beams. Just the low hiss of firewood slowly giving up its will to live, and the occasional rustle of someone adjusting their blanket of fur in exhaustion. You sit up slowly, cautious not to break the spell. This isn't peace, it's anticipation. Everyone's waiting for something, and you realise quickly, it's you. Not in a dramatic, you're chosen kind of way. No glowing runes, no destiny music. But there's this weird energy around you today. People glance at you differently. Not coldly, not mockingly, just attentively. You've become a curiosity, a test subject. The question is no longer, who is this outsider? It's what are they going to do next? You stretch, painfully, because your left shoulder still hasn't forgiven you for that hide-scraping marathon. You pull on your tunic and feel the weight of that little bone charm you were given the day before. It still smells faintly of herbs and something sweet, like burnt tree sap. You keep it under your collar now, not because you believe in its power exactly, but because everyone else does, and that means something. As you walk toward the fire pit, someone hands you a small wooden bowl. Inside is a dark paste, blackened ash mixed with fat. You stare at it blankly. A girl smirks and points to her own cheeks, where dark streaks of the same stuff are painted beneath her eyes like some kind of prehistoric eye black. You get the message. It's war paint, or preparation paint, or something paint. You dip 2 fingers in and swipe lines across your cheeks. It smells smoky and a little metallic. You look up, and now everyone around the fire nods like, okay, that'll do. Here's the thing. Vikings didn't wear horned helmets, no matter what the cartoons told you. But they did mark themselves for rituals, raids, and seasonal rites. Paint, soot, blood, herbs, whatever symbolized intent. The Norse believed in embodying what you were about to become. You weren't just acting brave, you became bravery, or wrath, or silence, whatever was needed. Today, apparently, your role is to represent resilience, or at least functional confusion with decent core strength. You're led, out of the Longhouse by a few of the remaining young warriors. The wind bites the moment you step into it, slicing through your clothes like you committed a personal offence against winter. It's one of those days where the air doesn't move, because it's too thick with cold to bother. Frost crunches underfoot like glass. The group moves in silence, trudging toward the edge of the woods. You recognise the spot. They've brought you here once before. It's where the warriors practiced their throws and drills. Today, it's something else. Laid out on the snow, half buried and rimed with ice, are several wooden shields. Cracked, burnt, chipped at the edges. Some are clearly old, maybe even ceremonial. Others are fresh, still bearing smears of charcoal paint. Runes burned into the centre, symbols you don't know how to read but feel deep in your spine. You're handed one. It's heavier than you expect. Not just physically, though yes, your arms will hate this. It's heavy in presence, like it's carried more than wood and hide. Maybe history, maybe expectation. You sling it onto your left arm, awkwardly at first, and the girl beside you snorts softly and adjusts the strap for you. Not unkindly, just efficiently. You mutter thanks. She raises an eyebrow like, don't ruin it. Then someone hands you a stick, not a sword, not an axe. A wooden training blade, dull at the edge but still capable of breaking a rib if you do it wrong. And then the lesson begins. You're not fighting anyone yet. No duels, no dramatic tests of strength. It's form, stance, rhythm. The instructor, an older man with more scars than fingers, shouts commands in bursts of Old Norse. You mimic the motions, trying to keep up. Raise the shield, lower the blade, step forward, shift, strike, block, breathe. You're bad at this. Horribly, hilariously bad. But you don't stop, that's the real test. They're not expecting you to be good, they're expecting you to stay. To push through the burn in your thighs, the cramp in your wrist, the moment where your vision blurs because you forgot to blink for half a minute. You drop the shield once, twice. The third time, no one helps you pick it up. So you do, with shaking arms and clenched teeth. Historical fact time. Combat training wasn't limited to elite warriors. Most Norse communities trained young people in basic defence, even if they weren't destined for raids. Living in a world full of potential invaders, wild animals and long winters demanded resilience. If you couldn't swing an axe, you had to know how to dodge one. After what feels like hours, but is probably only 40 agonising minutes, you're finally allowed to collapse into the snowbank. Someone tosses you a water skin. You gulp it like it contains divine essence. It tastes like cold tin and victory. Someone else throws a handful of snow at your face. You flinch, then realise they're joking. They're including you. And here's the quirky, cultural tidbit of the day. Jokes were currency in Viking culture, not just for entertainment, but for status. If you were teased, roasted, mocked, it meant you were in the circle. If people ignored you, that was the true insult. Being mocked was, weirdly, a badge of inclusion. Back at the Longhouse, you stagger toward your usual place near the hearth, but someone pats the floor next to them. Closer. Better view. You sink down with a groan, limbs screaming, and notice your breath fogging in front of you in slow, steady clouds. You're not shaking anymore. As the fire pops, someone starts singing, a low, rough melody. Not cheerful, but strong. Others join in, one by one. You don't know the words, but the rhythm sinks into your skin. You hum along, close enough. The woman who gave you the bone charm smiles faintly. You can't believe it. You're sure your ribs are cracked, your brain's melting, and your shoulder's never going to work again. But somehow, This is the first time you feel warm. Not fire warm, people warm. You sit there a long time, shield still strapped to your arm, singing a song you'll never fully understand. And for once, you don't want to go home. Your arms don't work. You discover this the next morning when you try to lift the fur blanket, and it takes a full 15 seconds for your shoulders to respond like, "Oh, you meant now?" You groan. Not because it hurts, though it does, but because you already know what kind of day this is going to be. The kind where every step feels like dragging a sack of gravel, and every movement reminds you that your body was not built for repeated shield drills in sub-zero temperatures while being judged by teenage berserker prodigies. The Longhouse is buzzing again. Not chaotic, but busy. Focused. Something's brewing in the air. Maybe it's anticipation, or maybe someone left the fermented herring out too long. Either way, the rhythm is faster today. People move like they're trying to finish a to-do list before nightfall. You haven't heard any word of the raiding crew's return, but there's definitely something coming. And then, there it is. A low call from the watchpoint. 2 short blasts of the horn, sharp, rising, then cut off. Everyone stops. The raiders are back. You stand too fast and immediately regret it. Your knees do a weird soft collapse and you have to lean on the doorframe like you're dramatically overcome with emotion instead of just barely functioning. But still, you follow the crowd. Everyone pours out into the biting cold, faces turn toward the fjord, and there it is, the longship, sleek and dark, gliding through the water like a shadow with a mission. You can see the figures aboard now, standing tall at the prow. Furs whipping in the wind, spears lifted high, bloodied banners catching what little sun leaks through the clouds. The carved dragon head at the bow looks more smug than ever, like it knows it made it back in one piece and gets to see the Longhouse again before snow really swallows the land. They pull ashore fast with practiced ease. Ropes are flung, crates are dragged off, sacks thud into the snow, and there's shouting, but not the celebratory kind. Urgent, clipped. Something's not right. The crowd parts, and you see the chieftain limping slightly, one arm wrapped tightly in cloth. His eyes are sharp, though, not panicked, just tired. Around him, a few younger warriors carry a stretcher. There's someone on it. You don't know their name, but you recognize the face. The house goes quiet. You hear only the fire crackling from the chimney, the distant flap of the banner, and the crunch of boots in the snow. And then, grief moves like a wave, not wailing, not the theatrical kind. Just heavy silence, broken by one sudden cry. From the mother, you assume. It's a raw, torn sound, pulled from somewhere beneath speech. Someone steps forward to steady her, but she doesn't collapse. She stares straight ahead, shoulders stiff, eyes blazing with something that might be rage or defiance, or the last fragment of a prayer. You turn away, not out of disrespect, but because it feels too large to witness. The Longhouse absorbs the grief again, just like it always does. Death is not rare here, it's not dramatic, it's simply part of the cycle. But that doesn't mean it's dull. It cuts, clean and cold, and leaves behind silence that everyone understands but no one can fix. Here's your historical fact of the day. Viking raids didn't guarantee glory. For every warrior who returned with a chest of silver or a new scar to brag about, there were plenty who didn't come back at all, or who came back broken, arms shattered, eyes gone, voices never the same. The stories always tell you about the heroics. They skip the limping and the frostbite, and the realization that no amount of mead can fill the hole left by your dead brother. Back inside, the Longhouse becomes a place of sorting. Some tend the wounded, others unload the spoils of the raid, sacks of grain, finely wrought iron tools, carved trinkets from a distant coast. A single gilded cross, small and bent, probably stolen from a church. Someone holds it up and snorts. Not mockery, just disbelief. This too will be repurposed, but no one celebrates. Not yet. Not tonight. You're pulled into the healing circle, not to be treated, but to assist. You're handed rags, clean water, and a task. Wash the wound. The warrior who sits in front of you is barely conscious, his forehead sheened with sweat and grime. His leg is sliced open, thigh to knee. You try not to gag. You wash. You press. You learn how to pack moss into a wound. You learn how to wrap a bandage so it doesn't fall apart. You learn what pain looks like when it's swallowed whole and endured without a word. And you realise something else, something cold and visceral. There is no fantasy here. The movies lied. The sagas softened it. This life is brutal. Even when you win, you bleed. Even when you survive, you come home missing something. Quirky fact. Vikings sometimes brought back foreign captives from their raids, not always for slavery, though that happened plenty. Some were adopted, integrated, even given new roles in the household. One man in this longhouse, grey-haired, missing a finger, always sitting near the back, has an accent different from the others. You realise now he was probably a captive once too. You wonder if that will be you, if you'll stay forever, if they'll rename you, carve your rune into something wooden and solid, and no one will remember where you came from. Later that evening a small ceremony begins, nothing grand. A few words spoken near the fire, a cup of ale poured into the flames, names murmured, stories retold. The fallen warrior's cloak is laid across his bed one last time, then folded, stored, used again maybe. That's another historical debate. How much ritual did everyday Vikings perform for their dead? Scholars argue over whether there were elaborate, consistent rites, or if customs varied from house to house. Cremations, burials, offerings, some with pomp, others just silent memory. But in all cases there was something. Death mattered. Death had to be honoured, even if it was done in whispers. You sit close to the fire, staring into its heart. You're exhausted. Your hands ache. Your arms are bruised. And yet you feel more grounded than you ever did in your normal life. This place doesn't care about convenience or comfort or even fairness, but it does care about endurance. Tonight, no one sends you to sleep at the edge of the longhouse. You're not by the door anymore. You're near the centre, within arm's reach of the fire. You lie down slowly, one ear still tuned to the shifting voices, one hand curled loosely around the bone charm at your chest. Tomorrow will be worse, or better, or exactly the same. But tonight, for the first time, they mourned beside you, and didn't flinch. You wake to screaming, not the panicked someone's dying kind of scream. No, this is far more casual, like someone's just been woken up by a bucket of icy water and decided to share their discomfort with everyone. A few seconds later, a crash, then laughter, then footsteps, heavy, fast, boots-on-dirt thunder, as a teen barrels through the longhouse with a bloody nose and a grin like he just won the lottery. Another teen follows, grinning wider, holding a spoon. Yes, a spoon. You sit up, disoriented, blinking the sleep and soot from your eyes. Around you the household is coming to life like a creaking beast. Blankets thrown aside, fires stoked, children fighting over boots, business as usual. The chieftain, who somehow sleeps less than anyone and yet still looks like he could carry a horse on his shoulders, is already standing near the central fire muttering to his inner circle. You look back at the teens. The nosebleed kid is dabbing at his face with a scrap of fur, while laughing too hard to breathe. The spoon wielder smirks and mimes a duel, twirling the utensil like it's a short sword. The rest of the room doesn't even blink. Because here's the thing about Viking longhouses. Everything is a weapon. That's not an exaggeration. It's a lifestyle. A mindset. In a world where you might be raided, challenged, or trampled by livestock on any given Tuesday, anything within arm's reach becomes a potential tool for survival, or, at the very least, intimidation. And in this case, that includes a ladle made from a carved reindeer antler with a suspiciously sharp edge. You watch as the boys settle into a sort of mutual truce, still laughing, still bleeding slightly. No one lectures them. No one scolds, because pain here isn't a lesson, it's assumed. Like smoke, or cold, or hunger. You get hurt, you get up, you keep going. You shuffle over to your usual spot by the fire and pull your fur tighter around you. You've been here long enough now that no one points when you take the good seat, the one that doesn't collapse under your butt or release a mysterious puff of lice on contact. Someone hands you a bowl, more of that thin fish and turnip soup that somehow tastes worse every time, yet you still finish it like it's gourmet. Later that morning, you're given a new task, not cooking, not animal care, not even hide scraping, which you've reluctantly grown decent at. Today, you're crafting, specifically, carving. They hand you a small block of bone, probably cow or deer, and a knife that's sharp enough to make you nervous. You're shown a simple design, a curling knot, like an endless loop. Decorative, yes, but more than that. It's a bind rune, a symbol meant to protect. or strengthen, or attract favour. The meanings are loose, layered. You're not expected to understand, you're just expected to try. You sit cross-legged in the warmest patch of dirt you can find, tongue poking from the corner of your mouth as you scratch the blade along the smooth white surface. The first few cuts are clumsy, uneven, one goes too deep. But no one mocks you. A woman sits beside you and gently takes your hand, adjusting the angle of the blade. Her eyes are kind in the way that says, "You're hopeless, but at least you're trying." Historical fact time. Viking artistry wasn't just decoration, it was storytelling. Carvings, runes, metalwork, they all had purpose. They told who you were, what you valued, what you feared. Bone and wood were common canvases, especially for beginners. If you could carve, you could record. You could be remembered. Here's your quirky tidbit. Some Viking spoons, yes, spoons, were carved with runes that cursed anyone who stole them. Imagine making your own cutlery, then hexing the next guy who tries to borrow it. You glance across the room at the spoon fighter from earlier and think, yeah, maybe that one had a curse on it. As the day stretches on, your fingers grow steadier. You complete one carving, then another, a charm for strength, a symbol of safe return. You're not sure if they'll work, but you don't care. The act of carving them is strangely calming, focused, almost sacred. And then the chieftain calls your name. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a simple word spoken from the fire. You stand, you walk over, everyone watches. You try not to trip on the mat near the hearth that always folds under your foot. He holds out an axe. Not a huge war axe, a hand axe. Practical, balanced. The blade has been recently polished, but the handle is worn, gripped by many hands over many years. He says something short, too fast for you to fully grasp, but the word carry is clear, not fight, just carry. You nod. He nods back. You take the axe. And just like that, something changes. You feel it ripple through the room, subtle but deep. It's not applause, it's not ceremony, it's acknowledgement. For the first time, you're not just a stray pet they've been feeding out of pity. You're something else now. Not quite one of them, but definitely not. Scholarly debate for today. Did outsiders truly integrate into Viking society? We know they traded, married, even adopted customs. But were they accepted fully? Some say yes. If they proved useful, loyal, tough. Others argue blood and clan still mattered most. But clearly some managed it. Somehow. You strap the axe to your belt, awkward but proud. That night you eat earlier. With the inner group, not at the edge. The soup is thicker, there's bread. The old woman who usually mutters at you now mutters in your general favour. Later a storm rolls in. Wind shrieks against the wooden walls. Snow pelts the thatch so hard it sounds like fists. The fire roars in defence. Everyone pulls closer, blankets layered, bodies overlapping like a pile of survival instincts. You sit among them, knees tucked in, axe against your hip. Someone begins telling a story. This time, about a girl who carried a blade she didn't earn and learned to use it when it mattered most. No one looks at you. But the air shifts, the story ends, the fire pops, and someone passes you the last piece of bread without being asked. You're not sleeping. Not really. You're lying there with your eyes closed, curled beneath your ever-damp fur wrap, trying to convince your body that the howling wind and occasional drip of melting ice water from the beams above doesn't matter. You've learned how to pretend now. Pretend you're warm. Pretend the fire's still strong. Pretend your knees don't ache like you're twice your age. But real sleep, that's a rare and suspicious visitor. When it comes, it brings dreams. Tonight, it brings something else. The old man, the one with the knotted spine and silver beard like wire, leans over you just before dawn, nudges your foot with the end of a walking staff carved in spirals. You blink awake, disoriented, expecting it to be another chore or punishment or some unexpected test of loyalty involving goats. But he doesn't speak, just gestures. You follow. Because at this point you've learned not to ask questions. And honestly, asking never helps. By the time you get a clear answer in Old Norse, the answer is either you're already doing it or duck. He leads you out into the pre-dawn cold, the kind that feels older than time and twice as bitter. The snow crunches in that eerie, muffled way it does when the world's asleep. You trudge behind him along a narrow path, past the barn, past the outer gate, into the woods, thin, bare trees scratching at the sky like they're trying to climb out. Eventually he stops in a clearing. A ring of stones, half buried in the frost, circles the area. At the centre is a flat, blackened stump, ancient and pitted, slick with snowmelt and ash. You recognise it, not because you've seen it before, but because it's exactly what it looks like. A sacred space. You step into the circle and the temperature seems to shift. Colder, quieter. The old man finally speaks, slowly, deliberately, words you barely understand, but a few cut through. Disser, etter, ve. You recognise them from whispered stories around the hearth. They mean spirit, ancestor, sacred place. He hands you a bundle. Inside, herbs, a dried fishtail, a flat stone marked with runes, and a small vial of animal blood, thick and congealed. You suddenly understand. This isn't a chore, this is a ritual. Today is the Night of the Veils, though they don't call it that exactly. It's not a festival, not a party. It's a whisper-thin seam in the year where the world of the living brushes up against the realm of the dead. It's a time for offerings, for memory, for caution. Historical fact. Viking spirituality didn't draw sharp lines between the living and the dead. Ancestors were part of the household. Guardians, advisors, lingering presences. You didn't just honour them, you invited them. Especially during the dark season, when the world felt more spirit than stone. You kneel by the stump following the old man's gestures, lay down the herbs, pour out the blood, burn the fishtail, place the rune stone where the smoke curls highest. You feel ridiculous, smelling like last night's soup, shivering, fingers stiff. But when you place your palm flat on the stump, something happens. You don't hear voices, no ghosts whisper your name, but your skin prickles, your breath fogs thick and fast, and somewhere deep in your ribcage a low tremor hums like a plucked string. The old man says something again, slowly this time. You piece it together. Now they know you. You walk back in silence. He doesn't explain. You don't ask. That's how it works. Inside the longhouse, the air is still heavy. No one's speaking above a whisper. You realise now, everyone did their offering. Some in the woods, some at the household shrine, some silently with nothing but a thought and a piece of bread left outside. But all of them have done it. Even the goat has been oddly quiet this morning, as if Snorri knows not to trample sacred air. Later, the elders gather near the hearth, and that's when the stories begin. Not sagas, not legends. Real ones. Family tales. The kind that don't make it onto runestones, but are passed down like heirlooms. A boy listens as his mother talks about the time her father hunted a bear with a fishing hook. A woman recites the names of her sisters, all dead, in order of their laughter. A man says nothing but clutches a bracelet in his hand for an hour. And then it's your turn. You're not expected to speak, but the silence leans toward you. You panic for a second. Then you remember. You talk about your grandmother, about the way she made soup every Sunday, how her house always smelled like cloves, how she told you stories about wolves and taught you how to whistle with your fingers. You speak slowly, your words stumble, but you speak. No one laughs, no one rolls their eyes, they just listen. And when you finish, the old woman beside you nods once and murmurs, "Your grandmother is here," and you believe her. Here's today's quirky fact. Vikings believed in fetches, ghost-like doubles that walked ahead of you, sometimes appearing before death, sometimes as protectors. Not everyone saw them, but they believed they were always there, listening, watching, guarding. That night the longhouse dims even earlier than usual. Lamps are snuffed. Voices go low. Even the fire seems to burn softer, lower, more aware. It's not fear, it's reverence. And somewhere in the quiet you hear a voice, not real, not loud, not in your ear, but in the same place you felt that tremor on the stump. It's familiar. And you don't know if it's your imagination or if you really heard your grandmother say your name. You curl under your fur, the charm still at your chest, your hands still stained with ash. You don't fall asleep. You drift. And the longhouse drifts with you. You wake in a cocoon of damp fur, body pressed against the longhouse wall, skin itchy from straw and sweat and your own inability to adjust to the everything is filthy all the time aesthetic. But you're warm, miraculously. Warm in that buried under layers, can't feel your feet so it must be working way. The fire is still alive, barely. Just a few glowing embers blinking in the dark like tired eyes. The smell of last night's offerings, burned herbs, ash, and something slightly fishy still clings to the beams. No one's speaking. Yet. And then it starts. Someone laughs. Not a chuckle. A full, loud, chest-deep laugh that cracks through the silence like an axe hitting dry wood. It comes from the back of the house. One of the younger men, back from the raid, clearly feeling alive in the most annoying way possible. He's seated on a fur mat surrounded by a few others, all drinking something from a massive hornpast, around like it's sacred. Which, in a way, it is. You sit up, and instantly you're seen. The loud one grins at you. Not mockery, just a spark of recognition like, "Ah, yes, the outsider lives." He gestures to the horn, then pats the space beside him. You walk over. Because honestly, what else are you going to do? He hands you the drinking horn. You take it cautiously. It's warm from too many mouths and sticky around the rim. You try not to think about how many diseases this object could carry, then take a sip. Mead. And not the watered-down ceremonial stuff you had once at a Renaissance fair. This is the real deal. Thick, honey-rich, bubbling with alcohol, and what tastes like a slight fermentation accident. It hits your throat and warms your stomach with a slow, molten creep. You take another sip, then another. By the time it gets passed along, your head is already buzzing. The edges of the longhouse begin to shimmer, not magically, just the way everything does when you've had enough alcohol to forget that you're covered in lice and haven't changed clothes in 2 weeks. And this is when the stories begin. Not whispered grief like the night before, not sacred memory. No, this is chaos. Saga mode, full throttle. Exaggerated tales of raids that probably didn't happen quite the way they're being told. One man claims he disarmed 3 monks using only his left foot and an eel. Another describes a battle with a bear that turned out to be 2 drunk Danes in fur coats. Someone swears they heard a goat speak, but only after the 2nd bottle. You laugh. Everyone laughs. The room is loud in the best way. Here's today's historical fact. Vikings loved stories, and they loved mead just as much. The drinking horn wasn't just a container, it was a symbol of community, status, and ritual. Mead was more than alcohol. It was hospitality. It was bonding. It was how you said, "you belong," without actually saying it. And your quirky detail of the day, there's a whole Norse myth about the mead of poetry, a magical brew that granted anyone who drank it the gift of eloquence and wisdom. Odin stole it, obviously, because that's what Odin does. He drinks things he's not supposed to and lies about it afterward. As the stories go on, someone turns to you and asks a question. You don't understand it all, but you catch enough to know they're asking if you have a story, and for once, you're not terrified to answer. You launch into your tale, loosely based on truth, wildly dramatized, about the time you got lost in a Costco parking lot and thought you were being followed by wolves, about how you wrestled a frozen pizza from another shopper and lived to tell the tale. It's ridiculous. It makes no sense in translation. But they get it. They howl with laughter. One man clutches his stomach. Someone shouts something that might mean pizza slayer. You sit back, flushed and buzzed and strangely proud. You've contributed to the noise, to the laughter, to the lore, and then someone throws a boot at your head. You duck, badly. It grazes your ear. You look up and the woman who threw it raises one eyebrow. She's grinning, not threateningly, just inviting you to respond. The room goes quiet. A challenge, not combat, not exactly. This is something else, something lower stakes but potentially more dangerous. A game. She picks up the boot again and steps into the firelight, slams it down in front of her, then gestures. You don't get it. Someone explains, in very broken gestured speech, that it's a kind of verbal duel. You insult her, she insults you. The crowd judges. The boot is symbolic, probably for kicking someone's pride, or maybe it's just there to stand on. Either way, you're now engaged in a full-on flighting match. Here's your scholarly debate. Was flighting a common Viking tradition, or just something glorified in later poems? No one's totally sure. The Skalds, those epic poets, recorded many flighting duels full of clever insults, biting wit, and often a suspicious number of bodily references. Whether average folks did it for fun, or whether it was mostly a courtly thing is still up for debate. But right now, it's real. You stand up, everyone cheers, she goes first, says something you don't quite catch, but the entire room gasps and starts cackling, so you assume it was brutal. You respond. You cobble together what little Old Norse you know, mime something about her smelling like fish stew and having the beard of a drunken sheep. It's terrible, but they laugh. She grins wider. Round 2, her turn is quicker, sharper, and ends with her pointing at your feet and then at the hearth. A man next to you translates softly. He's so weak, even the fire avoids him. You pretend to faint. They love it. You both go back and forth. Words, gestures, absurd faces. You lean into the absurdity. You mime Snorri the goat giving her fashion advice. She mocks your axe grip by cradling a stick like a baby. By the end, everyone is howling. Even the chieftain chuckles. She raises the boot like a trophy, then sets it on your head. Gently. A peace offering. You've lost. Clearly. But you don't feel like a loser. Tonight the Longhouse isn't a place of fear or grief or test. It's a stage. A hall of light and breath and wild, messy joy. You sit down again, breathless, heart pounding, cheeks sore from smiling. Someone hands you more mead, and for the first time, when you drink, no one watches to see if you belong. They know you do. You wake up with your cheeks stuck to the dirt floor, a thin line of drool frozen halfway to the edge of your chin. Your skull is pounding in that unique, vengeful way that only fermented honey can inspire, and your mouth tastes like you lost a drinking contest with a peat bog. Around you, the Longhouse is a slow-motion train wreck of hangovers. People sprawled across benches, furs, and each other like fallen dominoes in wool. Someone snores into a bowl, someone else is trying to locate their boot using only one eye and a lot of swearing. You sit up, groan, and promptly regret it. Everything hurts, including things that shouldn't, like your earlobes and your pride. But even through the ache, you smile. Because last night was chaos, and for the first time since you were unceremoniously dropped into this world of axes and gruel, you didn't feel like an outsider. You were part of the laughter, part of the storytelling, even part of the ritualistic roast battle that ended with a goat nibbling your sleeve in apparent approval. You made it. Mostly. Eventually, someone, probably a cruel soul sent directly from Odin's minor demons, shouts something like, "Up! Move! Water!" and throws open the door. A blast of freezing air slaps the room like a wet fish. People begin to stir, groaning like undead warriors. You shuffle toward the water bucket, rinse your face in what may as well be liquid knives, and chew on a chunk of hard bread that your teeth absolutely despise. You're halfway through your sad breakfast when the chieftain's daughter, she of the side-eye and silent judgment, appears in front of you and tosses something into your lap. It's a tunic, a new one. Well, not new, nothing is new. But it's less crusty than your current one, and clearly someone stitched this with purpose. The seams are reinforced, the sleeves are long, there are faint spirals embroidered at the cuffs, just enough to hint at status without pretending you have any. You glance up at her, blinking in confusion. She raises one eyebrow and says something short, clipped. You catch the word Skjaldmare, shield maiden. You're not sure if she's mocking you or inducting you. Either way, you put it on. You spend the morning outside, gathering wood. Not because anyone tells you to, but because your body needs movement. You need air that doesn't smell like stale mead and goat farts. You follow one of the boys into the trees, dragging a sled with rope handles and a pair of axes strapped to your belt. The silence of the forest is intense. You can hear everything. The crunch of snow under your boots, the rustle of a bird overhead, the creak of your joints protesting every step. The boy doesn't speak much, but he shows you where to chop, points at a pine, nods, then goes to work on another tree like it owes him money. You do your best to mimic his stance, plant your feet, raise the axe, swing. The blade bites into the trunk with a satisfying thunk, not deep but solid. You keep going. It takes forever. Your arms burn, your breath steams from your mouth in short bursts. Snow slips down your collar and immediately regrets it. But eventually you fell the tree. The boy nods, just once. It feels better than applause. Here's your historical fact. Wood gathering was constant and essential. Vikings didn't just use wood for warmth. They built their homes, their ships, their tools, their everything from it. Trees weren't resources. They were lifelines. And cutting them wasn't casual. It took skill and endurance, and knowing which ones to leave alone, especially in sacred groves. Quirky fact of the day. Some Norse trees were believed to house spirits. If you chopped the wrong one, it was said the spirit could haunt you, bring sickness, or cause your axe to shatter mid-swing. You silently hope no angry ghost elm is tracking your sloppy cuts. You drag the wood back. Your sled groans the whole way. By the time you reach the longhouse, you're panting like a dog, and your shoulders feel like overcooked breadsticks. But when the older man at the door sees the load, he grunts in approval and actually pats your shoulder. A tiny gesture. Monumental impact. You're becoming part of the economy of survival. Inside, the house is busy again. Not frantic, just layered with the buzz of productivity. The warriors are repairing gear. The smith is at the forge, shaping metal with a rhythm that makes your ears ring. The women are spinning wool, dyeing cloth, boiling herbs. The children are doing whatever they do, which mostly seems to involve screaming and hiding from chores. You get handed a knife and a hunk of bone. Time to carve again. But this time, you're not making charms. You're carving your name, or rather, the closest approximation of it in runes. One of the skalds, the storyteller who also serves as scribe, memory keeper, and general source of weird opinions, has decided that if you're going to keep hanging around, you should be recorded. Not as a thrall, not as a joke, as a person. You scratch the runes slowly, carefully. They don't flow like your alphabet, but they make more sense than expected. Each shape is sharp, deliberate, like everything here. Historical debate time. Did everyone in Viking society learn runes, or just the elite? Some historians argue that only skalds and traders needed to read or write. Others believe it was more widespread, used for labels, messages, magical protection. Runestones suggest a culture of commemoration, but the day-to-day literacy is still murky. You finish your name, set down the bone, flex your hand, which now resembles a claw. The skald nods and adds your carving to a wooden beam that already bears dozens of other names, some recent, some faded by years of smoke. It's a quiet gesture, but meaningful. You're now quite literally on the wall. That night, the mood is subdued again. Not sorrowful, just settled. The fire is high. Dinner is hearty. Some kind of stew that tastes suspiciously like it used to be 4 separate animals, and someone's roasting flatbread on a hot stone. The longhouse hums with comfort. Someone starts singing. A real song this time, not a chant or a dirge or a work rhythm. A melody with verses. About ships. About longing. About returning home to find someone has taken your favourite knife but left the mead, so you call it a fair trade. You hum along, even though you don't know the words, and when you finally crawl into your pile of furs, limbs sore, eyes heavy, you hear the skald whispering to someone near the fire. They carved their name today. Not in awe, just in observation. Just a fact, but it echoes. Because in this place, a name isn't just what people call you, it's what they remember. You've stopped checking the sun to guess the hour. There's no point. The days are short now, like a flickering candle that shows up late and leaves without saying goodbye. When it rises, it does so lazily, casting a grey-blue haze over the snow and hills, just enough to make the longhouse glow like a sunken eye in a skull. But inside, life pushes on. Fires are fed, spoons are fought over, and you're no longer surprised by any of it. You've also stopped being surprised by the smell. It's complex. Layers of smoke, wet fur, goat musk, old meat, herbs, and that unnameable scent of humans living far too close for far too long. But here's the strange thing. You don't mind it anymore. Your nose, once delicate and filled with judgment, has adjusted. You've gone full Viking in that one. Very specific, very disturbing way. You've made peace with perpetual odour. Today, however, smells different. Not worse, just unfamiliar, sharp and sweet. Something like burnt sugar, but earthier. You follow the scent across the longhouse until you find its source. A cauldron full of boiling birch bark and a moss. You blink. The woman tending it, same one who gave you the bone charm, catches your look and chuckles. She points to the cauldron and says a word you don't know. Then she holds up a strip of linen and dunks it into the brew. A moment later she pulls it out, now stained a pale gold. Ah, they're dyeing cloth. The winter is deep now, which means the work has changed. No more frantic harvests or long fishing trips. No raids, just craft, repairs, creation. The house becomes a quiet hive, every corner buzzing with some form of transformation. You're assigned to assist with dyeing and weaving. It sounds like a break from wood chopping and goat wrangling, but turns out to be its own brand of torment. First, your hands get dunked into cold water. So many times your bones feel like they're made of ice. Then you spend hours unravelling old wool, stripping it down to its threads, respinning it into clean lines and twisting it into skeins that make your wrists ache. You don't complain, you've learned not to. Complaints get ignored at best and assigned to latrine duty at worst. Historical fact of the day: Vikings were deeply skilled textile workers. Weaving wasn't just for women, it was survival. Every sail, every tunic, every winter cloak came from the painstaking labour of hands twisting, dyeing, cutting, stitching. Some of the wealthiest people in Norse society were textile specialists, with certain colours, like deep blue and rich red, reserved for those who could afford the rare plants or insects required to create them. Quirky fact: urine was used in the dyeing process. Yep, human urine. It helped set the colours and soften the cloth. This explains why the woman next to you keeps a clay jug nearby that smells aggressive. You try not to ask. You definitely don't sniff it. The loom stands tall at one end of the longhouse, a simple vertical frame strung with pale threads. You watch as one of the older women moves through it like a dance, fingers tugging, shifting, pulling the weft through the warp with practiced ease. She doesn't glance up, doesn't need to. Her eyes are somewhere else, maybe on the pattern, maybe on the memory of doing this 1,000 times before. Then she gestures for you to take her place. You freeze, but she insists. You step up, take the shuttle, thread it through, pull tight. The first few tries are clumsy. You tangle the threads. You pull too hard. The line ripples. She doesn't scold you, just clicks her tongue, reaches out, corrects your hand position. Soon you find the rhythm. Weave, shift, pull, beat. It becomes a meditation. The house fades around you. You stop thinking about your sore shoulders, your lack of privacy, your feet that haven't felt clean in weeks. You just move, create. The cloth grows slowly, row by row, like a snowfall building a blanket over time. Here's the scholarly debate for today. How much did Viking textiles influence their reputation abroad? Some argue it was their cloth, fine, brightly dyed, durable, that spread their name as much as their swords. Fragments found across Europe suggest they traded more than metal. Others insist that cloth was considered too common to be that important. But there's no denying it. The Norse knew their way around a loom. By late afternoon, your arms are trembling and your eyes feel full of tiny knots. The fire's glow deepens. Someone calls for food, and once again, you're handed a bowl of stew and a flat, dense slab of barley bread that doubles as a plate and a projectile. Tonight, there's no storytelling, no singing, just quiet chewing, crackling flames, and the soft sound of wool being spun in the background. But after dinner, the old woman, the one with fingers like bark and a laugh like gravel, presses something into your palm. It's a scrap of cloth. Your cloth. The one you helped weave. Crude. Lopsided. A little stained from dye that didn't quite settle, but undeniably yours. You don't know what to say, so you nod. She nods back. That's all you need. You fold the cloth and tuck it into your tunic next to the bone charm, and just like that you've contributed something lasting. Not strength, not defence, not humour, usefulness. That night the longhouse is colder than usual. The wind howls outside like it's trying to remind everyone who's really in charge. The fire struggles against it, sparks flaring like fists. You curl deeper into your furs, the woven scrap clutched in one hand. You're not dreaming of escape anymore. You're dreaming of completion, of making something that endures, and here that's everything. The wind won't stop. It howls around the longhouse like a hungry thing, slithering under the eaves, clawing at the beams, moaning through every crack in the wood. You've gotten used to the cold by now, or at least you've accepted that you'll never stop being cold. But this wind is different. It has presence, intention. It's not just air, it's a warning. The others feel it too. You wake to hushed murmurs, not alarm, not yet. Just that tight kind of conversation that only happens when people are pretending not to worry. The fire's already been stoked high, and everyone is up earlier than usual. There's an edge to their movements, more fur gets layered on. Boots are double-checked. Food is passed around with fewer jokes. Even Snorri the goat is subdued. You almost miss his usual headbutt to the thigh. You eat your breakfast, some kind of porridge with a bit of dried fruit thrown in, probably to distract from the fact that it tastes like lukewarm regret. And then you're ushered outside. The chieftain is standing near the fence, his arms crossed over his chest, staring out toward the hills. He doesn't say anything, just gestures for you to follow as a group forms behind him. Scouts, warriors, elders, a few others like you who have no clear title but are increasingly expected to show up. You hike into the wind. The landscape is blanketed in white, the snow beaten into hard, glossy drifts. Every step sinks you knee-deep, but no one slows down. You pass through groves of skeletal trees, over frozen creeks that groan beneath your weight, until you reach a rise in the land. Below, tracks, dozens of them, bootprints, hoof marks, dragging signs in the snow where sleds or bodies might have passed. You've seen tracks before, but not like these. You glance around, no one panics, but the tension is thick. The scouts fan out, crouching low, checking depth and direction. Someone mutters, "East," and another points toward the forest line where the trees are dense and darker than they should be. Then the decision is made. The group turns back. You don't ask. You've learned better. Historical fact of the day. Viking settlements were constantly aware of threats. Not just raids from across the sea, but rival clans, wolves, starvation, even restless spirits. Longhouses weren't built for decoration. They were fortresses, sanctuaries. In the middle of nowhere, trust wasn't just cultural, it was survival. You return home in silence. Back inside, preparations begin. The weapons come out, not just the decorated axes and polished blades, but the everyday tools, cleavers, hooks, spears tipped with iron, bone, or just very sharp wood. Shields are repaired, buckles checked. Someone starts heating tar to seal the outer door. People move quickly now, efficient, no panic, just certainty. Something's coming. And that's when it happens. You sit by the fire later, rubbing warmth back into your fingers, when the skald begins chanting. Not a song, not a story, a riddle. In Norse tradition, riddles weren't just games. They were tests of wisdom, memory, and sometimes prophecy. Spoken in rhyme, twisted in meaning, they dance between humour and warning. The skald's voice is low, half lost in the sound of the wind rattling the roof. Everyone listens. In the dark it travels, in your bones it sings. It wears no crown, but still it rules kings. The room is silent. Then a boy answers, "Fear." The skald nods once. Another, "I rise though I am broken. I fall but leave a mark. I am lost when I am spoken, yet found in every heart." You whisper it before you realise. Silence. The skald looks at you, and then, for the first time, smiles. Quirky fact. Some Norse riddles were passed down like heirlooms. Others were completely improvised, often vulgar, occasionally used to settle arguments. Entire verses existed just to insult someone's intelligence in rhyme. Flighting might bruise your ego, but riddles were where you proved your mind. Later, you lie back on your pile of furs, mind buzzing not with fear, but with dreams. And they're strange tonight. You're in the forest again, but the snow is gone. The trees are taller, older, woven with runes that shift and glow. You walk barefoot, though the ground is warm, soft with moss. Ravens circle overhead. 2 of them, always 2. They land before you. One says nothing, just stares. The other speaks, but the voice is your own, layered with something older. "Remember," it says, "you don't ask what. In dreams you never do." You wake suddenly. The wind has stopped, but the silence it leaves behind is worse. The longhouse is still. You rise slowly. Reach for your cloak, your charm, your belt where your little axe rests. You move toward the door, heart beating like a drum made of snow and smoke. You pull it open. The world is white, perfectly white. Fresh snow has fallen, untouched, unstirred, still drifting lazily through the sky like ash from a distant fire. And on the edge of the clearing stands a figure, tall, cloaked, still. You squint, and then it's gone. No tracks, no sound, just the fading image in your mind. Scholarly debate of the day. Did Vikings truly believe in prophetic dreams and visions? We know they placed great value on dream interpretation, especially for women whose dreams were seen as more spiritually significant. Some claimed their fate was shown to them long before it arrived. Others insisted dreams were just the gods whispering sideways. You don't know what you believe, But you do know you've seen something, or someone, and you're no longer afraid. You step back inside, close the door behind you, and return to your place by the fire. Not because you think you're safe, but because you're ready. You wake to the sound of someone sharpening a blade. It's not loud, not urgent, just steady. That rhythmic, scraping whisper of stone against steel. It's oddly soothing, the kind of sound that tells you everything's normal, and also that someone is preparing for violence. You sit up slowly, stretch beneath your wool blanket and glance around. The Longhouse is quiet, but not in the solemn way it was during funerals or rituals. This is different. Everyone's awake, focused, moving with quiet intensity. Armour is being checked, swords oiled, axes inspected with the sort of reverence usually reserved for newborns or heirloom cheese. Someone walks past you wearing a helmet you've never seen before. It's simple. Iron, close-fitting, with a narrow nose guard. No horns, of course. Vikings didn't actually wear horns. But something about the weight of it, the way the man's jaw clenches beneath it, tells you this isn't for show. Today is not a drill. You grab your tunic, sling your fur over your shoulders and buckle your belt. Now a little looser from the weeks of barley and broth. You don't even need someone to tell you to report to the fire. You just go, like everyone else. The chieftain is already there, standing tall despite the faint limp in his left leg. Around him, warriors, scouts, and now, you. He doesn't shout. He doesn't need to. He speaks low and slow, words rolling like stones down a hillside. You can't follow all of it, but you catch the key pieces, tracks, sleds, too close. Last night, another clan. Not a full raid, not yet. A scouting party maybe, or hunters testing boundaries. But that doesn't matter, because in this world, you don't wait for permission to defend yourself. You prepare, and suddenly you're part of that preparation. Your task? Reinforce the wall, which sounds simple until you realise what reinforce means in Viking terms. Haul thick, frozen logs from the woodpile, wedge them into the outer fence, dig through permafrost with a pick that's half rust and half willpower, and then smear pitch over the cracks while your fingers go numb to the wrist. Still, you do it, because you're in. You're trusted. No one checks your work twice. No one smirks when your pitch goes on a little crooked. Someone even hands you a mitt made of sheepskin and grunts. Use this. It's the most practical kindness you've received in weeks. Historical fact of the day. Viking longhouses were not passive shelters. They were defensible fortresses. Especially in winter, when food was scarce and tempers ran hot. Clashes between settlements were common. Walls, ditches, elevated ground, all strategic. The longhouse wasn't just home, it was your shield. As you work, your breath fogs the air, your muscles burn and your back tries to quit. The others say little, but every so often someone passes you a chunk of smoked meat, or a sip from a shared flask. No words, just fuel. By midday the sun peeks out, brief, pale, more of a gesture than actual help, and a lookout. Shouts something from the roof, everyone freezes. Then movement, swift, efficient. Weapons are grabbed, doors barred. You get pulled inside by a warrior whose name you still don't know, but whose hands are steady and sure. Inside, the longhouse tightens. People position themselves by the door, by the shutters, by the gaps in the timber where they can peer out. The elders move to the centre, surrounded by the stronger fighters. The children are ushered to the far end, where the fire's warmth is greatest. You're placed near the door, your axe is in your hand. You've never felt so awake. And here's your quirky detail for the day. Vikings often trained their young and untested fighters through real-life defence drills. If you hadn't yet been on a raid, defending your home was the next best thing. The difference between a farmer and a warrior was sometimes just timing. You glance at the others around you. Faces grim, eyes focused, no yelling, no bravado, just readiness, the quiet before the storm, and then nothing. Minutes pass, then an hour. A scout returns, alone, and shakes his head. Gone. No attack. Not today. The tension doesn't break immediately. It lingers, suspended in the smoky air like a song that hasn't quite ended. But gradually weapons are lowered. Shoulders ease. A sigh escapes someone near the back like steam from a kettle. But the lesson remains. This is how life works here. You're never truly safe. You're never off duty. Even peace is just the time between sharpenings. That evening no one celebrates. No feasting, No storytelling, just a quiet, slightly nervous meal, and the sound of fire popping as pitch melts down the logs you hauled. After dinner, you're given something unexpected, a needle and thread. You blink. The chieftain's wife hands it to you without a word, then tosses a thick wool tunic into your lap. It's patched but sturdy, and around the neck hole the stitching has come loose. You stare down at it, confused. She mutters something. You catch one word, mending. Apparently defence includes sewing, so you sit. You stitch. It's slow work, sloppy. But by now, your hands have learned patience. The fire crackles beside you. Someone hums. You hear laughter in the far corner, low, tired, but real. And here's your scholarly debate for the day. Were Viking gender roles truly rigid? Texts often paint a binary, but archaeological evidence says otherwise. Men sewed, women fought, children learned everything. Roles were based more on skill than assumptions, especially when survival was on the line. You finish the tunic. It's not beautiful, but it holds together. You set it aside and crawl into your corner of the longhouse, heart still thrumming from the near miss, axe still beside you, hands still tingling from pitch and thread. You lie awake for a long time, eyes on the ceiling beams tracing the soot marks left by generations before you. You're not just surviving anymore, you're helping to. Hold the walls up, the snow's gotten mean. Not the pretty, postcard kind you were foolish enough to romanticize when you first arrived. This is thick, wet snow, heavy as sin, falling in slabs from the sky like the gods are emptying their icebox one bucket at a time. It lands with wet thumps, slathering the longhouse roof and collapsing into the yard with the sound of a sigh that's just had enough of everything. The air is sharp, metallic. Each breath makes your nostrils sting and the inside of your nose feels like it's lined with frozen razors. You're outside, of course, because there is no snow day in a Viking settlement. You're helping shovel paths with a flat plank tied to a stick that technically qualifies as a tool. The snow keeps winning. Every foot you clear gets covered again 5 minutes later. But no one stops. Everyone works like the weather is a personal enemy. Because, let's be honest, it kind of is. Around you, the village has gone into winter lockdown mode. Every door is shuttered, every roof weighed down with snow and silence. Livestock are crammed into shelters that smell like nightmares. Fires burn day and night. Everyone's slightly hungrier, slightly snappier, and perpetually damp. The world outside the longhouse has narrowed to about 30 feet in any direction, and even that feels ambitious. You slip once, falling straight on your back into a drift so deep it feels like the earth is trying to eat you. A boy walking past offers a hand, smirking. You take it without complaint, because now you're used to it. Used to the cold, the work, the smirks, the aching bones, the fact that the snow is always plotting your downfall. It's not that you've gotten tougher, it's that the longhouse has worn you down into something functional. After the paths are briefly cleared, you're called inside. It's warmer than usual, the fire stoked high, a bubbling pot hung above it, and the chieftain's wife standing over it like a cauldron queen. She gestures for you to sit, then ladles out a thick stew-like mass of root vegetables, dried meat, and a broth so dense it feels like it could double as building material. You eat with enthusiasm. You've learned to savour anything vaguely warm and chewable. Then, the surprise. A second course. Sweetened porridge, thick with honey and topped with dried berries. Tiny, wrinkled, and probably older than you. You glance around in confusion, because this is luxury. Real, actual luxury. And that's when someone leans in and whispers, "Midwinter. Right, Jewel." Not the Christmas you grew up with, no carols or twinkling lights or awkward family reunions, but something older, wilder. This is the deepest night of the year, the turning point, when the days begin, slowly, painfully, to get longer. When the darkness begins to lose. Historical fact. Jul was the Norse celebration of the winter solstice, lasting several days. It blended agricultural cycles, ancestral reverence, and supernatural caution. Later Christian traditions would reshape it, but originally this was a time of survival and shadow. Offerings were made to the gods, and feasting, if you could manage it, was both a defiance of scarcity and a plea for light. That's what tonight is, a defiance. The longhouse transforms as the sun vanishes beyond the snow-choked horizon. Torches are lit, Extra food is placed near the hearth, not just for the living, but for the spirits. The Desir, the ancestors, the unseen. It's a night for remembering who stood here before you. Someone hands you a bundle of sticks, pine dried and wrapped in herbs. You're told to burn them in the fire and speak a name, not yours, someone else's. You freeze for a moment, then step forward. You drop the sticks into the flames, watching them crackle and twist. Then, softly, you say your grandmother's name again. You say it the Norse way, slow and deliberate, a mouthful of memory and smoke. No one claps, no one says anything, but the space around you feels settled. Quirky tradition. During Joel, spirits were believed to walk freely, and homes had to be cleaned, fires kept burning, and doors unlatched so that ancestors could visit without obstruction. Some families even left a seat open at the table just in case. Tonight you watch as they do just that. A small wooden stool left untouched near the fire with a piece of bread and a smear of honey set upon it. A gesture, a welcome, and maybe a warning. Later there's a toast. A full drinking horn is passed around. Mead, obviously. Strong, sweet, and somehow sharper than last time. Each person who drinks speaks a short phrase, sometimes a blessing, sometimes a memory. One man raises it and simply says, "For the dead who taught me how to live." When it comes to you, you hold it carefully, aware of the weight of all the hands that came before. You take a sip, cough slightly because it's still poison, and then whisper, "For staying when I could have run." That earns you a slow nod from the Scald. Then comes the fire ritual. They open the main door, not for long, just a few minutes, and let the freezing wind whip inside. A torch is thrown into the snow, a symbol, apparently, of banishing the darkness. You're told to watch the flame flicker in the white and imagine the sun returning. You do. You pretend. And for the first time, you almost believe it. Later still, the singing starts. Not loud, not drunken. These songs are old, software carried low in the throat and heavy in the bones. You don't know the words, but your voice joins in anyway, humming between phrases, catching a note here, a breath there. It becomes a low, endless lullaby that wraps the longhouse in heat and harmony. And when you finally crawl into your corner, new straw beneath you, clean fur, stomach full, hands still smelling of herbs and smoke, you realise something strange. You're not hoping for rescue anymore. You're not counting the days. You're just here. And somehow that's enough. Outside, the wind howls like it doesn't know the feast is happening, like it wants to crash the party and isn't invited. Inside, you sleep, and you dream not of escape, but of spring. You don't realise the change right away. It's subtle, slow, more of a suggestion than a transformation. The cold hasn't lifted, the snow hasn't melted, and there's certainly no sign of green. But something in the light is different. The sun rises earlier now, just a little, and lingers longer, like a guest no longer in a rush to leave. The sky's pale grey has hints of warmth behind it, like there might be a blue hiding back there, waiting for its cue. The others notice too. You see it in how they move, less hunched, less bone-weary. They talk more, joke more. Someone tosses a snowball at a goat and no one scolds them. Even Snorri looks slightly less demonic. You're up early, voluntarily. That's still weird. You're helping prepare fishing gear today because the fjord hasn't fully frozen, and it's time to restock the larder with something that doesn't taste like goat or regret. You sit on a low bench, untangling lines, testing bone hooks for cracks, checking netting made of spun horsehair. It's repetitive work, soothing, and you've grown to love it. And then the chieftain approaches. He squats beside you, just like that, without ceremony, and holds out a length of wool-wrapped cord. You blink at it, confused, until he unwraps it to reveal a seal-bone pendant, carved with tight spirals and small protective runes around its edge. He points at it, then points at you. No speech, no feast, just this. You swallow. This isn't jewellery, it's recognition. You take it with both hands. The cord is coarse but warm from his palm. The pendant is simple but heavy, dense with meaning, and maybe superstition. You slip it around your neck next to the bone charm next to your carved scrap of cloth. You don't say anything, you don't have to. Historical fact. Status symbols in Norse culture were not always flashy. A simple brooch, a carefully dyed cloak, a carved bead. All were markers of identity and belonging. These items weren't for strangers. They were for the household, for for those who knew how to read the signs. You return to your fishing lines. Later that day you're invited, not ordered, to join a small group on the edge of the fjord. You go. Of course you do. The wind off the water is still bitter enough to chap your lips into oblivion, but the air smells like life again. Salt, fish, wet stone. It smells like things that grow. They show you how to drop the net without tangling it, how to bait the hooks, how to cut through the ice with a saw made from deer antler and sheer spite. You fish with numb fingers and aching shoulders and catch absolutely nothing, but it doesn't matter, because they let you try, and that's the point. You return in the dark with empty buckets but light hearts. Back in the Longhouse, someone's roasting root vegetables over the fire, and the smell is so good you briefly consider proposing marriage. You settle for grabbing a bowl and wedging yourself into your usual spot. You glance around as you eat. These faces that were once strange and severe are now familiar. You know who will fall asleep first, who will mumble in their sleep, who snores, who always wakes up last. You know which of them braids her hair differently when she's grieving, which man hums under his breath when sharpening his blade, which child tugs your sleeve before asking for help mending a wooden toy. You've been here long enough to memorise people. Quirky fact of the day, Viking households operated like small universes. Everyone knew everything about everyone. Privacy didn't exist, not out of malice, but necessity. Lives were lived in view, secrets were rare. That deep familiarity, it could be maddening, but it also kept you alive. After dinner, someone pulls out a drum, a real one. Stretched skin over a round wooden frame painted with symbols that shift in the firelight. A few others join in with clapping, foot stomps and low whistles through hollow reeds. And then the skald stands. Tonight they tell your story. It's not literal, not really. They're not naming you outright. But it's you, a stranger from the ice, dropped from nowhere. Soft hands, confused face. They exaggerate it, of course. They claim you screamed at a chicken and mistook a squirrel for a god. The room laughs, but then the story shifts. The stranger learns, the stranger weaves. The stranger carries water, hauls wood, holds a blade. The stranger defends, and when the dark comes, the deepest night, the stranger stays. And when they finish, no one laughs. Someone claps you on the back, someone else refills your cup. The goat lays down beside you, which is either a sign of grudging affection or a power move. You sit in the glow of the fire, and for the first time you ask yourself, what if this was never a detour? What if this wasn't a mistake, a fluke, a punishment? What if you were always meant to be here? Scholarly debate of the day. Did Viking culture allow for true reinvention? Some historians argue that your fate was set by birth and blood. Others point to the countless tales of thralls becoming free, outcasts earning a name, foreigners rising to power. The sagas are full of transformations, heroes shaped by hardship, belonging earned through struggle. You don't know the answer, but you know this. You're not who you were, not anymore. And as you curl up that night, clean blanket, mended tunic, charms against your skin, you realise you've passed the final test. You stayed, you adapted, you endured. And here, in this brutal, beautiful, endlessly cold place, that's what makes you one of them. The Longhouse is quiet tonight. Not silent, never silent, but gentler. The fire burns low, casting soft orange, light on beams soaked in centuries of smoke. Shadows dance across sleeping faces and the curved horns of tools hung carefully above beds. Outside, the wind rustles through trees not quite as bare as before. The cold is still there, biting at the doorframe and licking the shutters, but it feels less cruel now, like it's remembered how to be part of the world instead of fighting against it. You lie on your back beneath your fur blanket, arms folded, staring up at the timber roof. You can trace every beam now, every knot in the wood, every hanging charm strung with beads or animal teeth or bundles of herbs that have long since turned brittle. The air smells of pine smoke, wool, and something faintly sweet. Maybe the last of the winter berries drying near the rafters. Your axe rests beside you. Not a weapon anymore, just an extension of your daily life, like your tunic, like your breath, like your name, carved into the wood above your bed with clumsy hands and borrowed letters. You listen. Someone coughs. Someone murmurs in sleep. A dog shifts. Snorri grumbles in his corner and headbutts a wall, which gets a soft chuckle from somewhere in the dark. A baby whimpers and is gently hushed. A log shifts in the fire with a puff of sparks. The rhythm of a life you never expected to know. A rhythm that, against all odds, now includes you. You think of everything it took to get here. The cold, the blisters, the bruises from carrying wood, and shame, and the weight of never quite belonging. Until you did. You think of the rituals, the shared meals, the mud, the laughter, the endless stew, the singing, the days spent scraping hides, the nights spent carving stories, the snow that tried to bury you, the fire that kept pulling you back. And you think of that first night, weeks ago, when you curled into yourself like a foreign object dropped into a world not made for you. When the Longhouse loomed large and strange and you didn't understand the rules, the language, or how to breathe in a place where survival was expected, not earned. Now, the Longhouse feels different, not smaller, just yours. You understand finally that survival here isn't about strength, it's about softness. The kind that bends but doesn't break. The kind that learns the song even when you don't know the words. The kind that watches the firelight flicker on the faces of people you once feared and sees family instead. Outside, the snow is melting, just barely. A trickle down the eaves, a crack in the drifts. Spring will come. It always does. But even if it didn't, even if the ice never lifted and the sky stayed grey and the goats kept chewing on everything they shouldn't, somehow now you'd be fine. Because you didn't just last a day in a Viking Longhouse, you lived it, and that, my friend, is more than most can say. Now close your eyes, the fire's still burning, the house is still breathing, and tomorrow is just another story waiting to be carved. Sleep well. Word. Count 300.